Hey guys, welcome to episode is it 84, and in this episode we're finally going to go from the end of May to the letter where he talks about painting Starry Night. So it's quite exciting. Good to see you, Chelsea, Robbie, Lamtoon, and although there are just four of you in chat, we that's enough. We are going to proceed. Timmy, are you happy to proceed? And we're going to jump right into. I don't know if you guys remember, we dealt with this letter from Dr. Peyron, and he was basically saying um, that Mr. Vincent is perfectly calm, and also I promised him that I would allow him to go see different points of view outside the establishment. We dealt with this in the previous episode. He also said, I must tell you that I reserve my prognosis, but I'm afraid it is serious. And then he kind of gave a tentative diagnosis of epilepsy. And then he says, if this is confirmed, it'll be necessary to be concerned for the future. Now, we're kind of going to jump a little bit out of time and deal with this letter from many months later, the 24th of February, and look at what he says. He has had another attack. It prevents him from writing to you. And the attack took place after a trip to All. And then he said, I note that the attacks are becoming more frequent and take place quite suddenly after every journey he undertakes away from this house. He has also confirmation that the trip between Saint-Remy and All is done with a carriage. And so, although Vincent has kind of been giving himself kind of a clean bill of health and he seems quite perky, you can see that he would slowly deteriorate. Bear in mind, he seems to do quite well in the summer months, which it is now, but then he doesn't do very well in winter. And so by February 1890, he would really not be in a very good place. And you can imagine how fraught the situation is. Every time he leaves the asylum, like completely, to go to all, he has like serious attacks, which is suggesting you shouldn't leave the asylum at all. And so when Van Gogh wants to go to Paris, it's like, well, this is a bit of a gamble, right? Okay, so now we're going to go to the 2nd of June, and we are now we are now basically in the final 2 weeks before Starry Night. Shall we jump in? Michelle, good to see you. So from Vincent to Theo, Saint-Remy, 2nd of June. My dear Theo, I must beg you again to send me as soon as possible some ordinary brushes about these sizes. And then he provides a drawing of the size. So he's literally saying he's begging his brother to send him, the tools of his trade, brushes, paints, etc. He says half a dozen of each, please. I hope you are well and your wife too, and that you're enjoying the fine weather a little. Here, at any rate, we have splendid sunshine. As for me, my health is good, and as for my brain, that will be, let us hope, a matter of time and patience. Now, as I've just said to you, he's actually is going to worsen with time. The director mentioned that he had had a letter from you and had written to you. He tells me nothing, and I ask him nothing, which is the simplest. He's a gouty little man, several years a widower, with very black spectacles. As the institution is a bit stagnant, the man seems to get no amusement out of his job. And besides, he has enough to live on. A new man has arrived who is so worked up that he smashes everything and shouts day and night. He tears his shirts violently too, and up until now, though he is all day long in a bath, he gets hardly any quieter. He destroys his bed and everything else in the room, upsets his food, etc. It is very sad to see, but they are very patient here and will end by seeing him through. You can imagine just one absolutely hysterical, I almost said prisoner, patient can be a nightmare to have around. You know, someone who just won't stop screaming, won't stop causing chaos, can really upend your day. And so they've just had a new man arrive. He says, now things grow old so quickly. I think that if I came to Paris in my present state of mind, I would make no difference between a so-called dark picture and a light impressionist picture, between a varnished picture in oils and a matte picture done with solvent. Now, part of what we're trying to do in this analysis is kind of figure out what kind of psychological magic is brewing in his mind that leads to Starry Night. You can see right on the right-hand side here, looks like he's painted a naked figure. And so he says, you know, in my present state of mind, it would make no difference if I painted a dark a dark picture or a light impressionist picture. Well, we beg to differ. It makes a great difference. And Starry Night itself is a very different kind of artwork, isn't it? It's very original. Anyway, he says, I mean by this that by dint of reflection, I've come by slow degrees to believe more than ever in the eternal youth of the school of Delacroix, Mallet, Rousseau, Dupré, and Daubigny, as much as in that of the present, or even in that of the artists to come. I hardly think that Impressionism will ever do more than the Romantics, for instance. Between that and the admiring people like Leon Glaise or Perrault, there's certainly a margin. This morning I saw the country from my window. Wow. Okay, so here we are getting a little bit of a peek into not only his psychology, but his situation, his room. I mean, it's from his room in the asylum that he painted Starry Night. Did you guys know that? And so he says, this morning I saw the country from my window a long time before sunrise. What does he mean by that? He means before dawn, while it was still dark. He sees the countryside. He looks at the countryside for a long period of time. Paula, good to see you. It is horrifying. And so this is one of the things he's doing. You can almost imagine that he's like in a prison cell and he's looking longingly out the window through the bars. And he kind of has a sense of, how long am I going to be here? What is going to happen? Excuse me, what is going to happen to me? What is my future? What is my fate? And so he sort of looks out over the countryside, and it's going to be a scene that is going to get to know very well in darkness and in light. And the interesting thing is that he actually mentions that fleetingly. He talks about that there's no difference between a dark picture and a light impressionist picture. And of course, Starry Night is going to be executed in the dark. I mean, I would tend to think of dark picture as the Dutch style, the potato eaters, that sort of bathroom light kind of thing, you know, shadows and so on. But I think he simply means at night, doesn't he? And then he says, with nothing but the morning star. So he's saying, I saw the country from my window a long time. It's almost like poetry, isn't it? And then he says, with nothing but the morning star, which looked very big. There's another little hint at what's going on. He's like, wow, the stars are quite big. I can see the star twinkling over the countryside. Daubigny and Rousseau have depicted just that, expressing all that it has of intimacy, all that vast peace and majesty. So you can see right now in early June, bear in mind it's summer, it's not going to be cold to be up that early. Here it certainly is. And he's already thinking in terms of peace and majesty. He's looking over the landscape. He's not just seeing there's a landscape over my shoulder, which I took right on the other side of Saint-Remy, right? And one person will just see a landscape. Someone else will see sunshine on the landscape. They'll see it in terms of light. Someone else will see it in terms of color. Someone else will see it in terms of texture. Someone else in terms of a combination of these, right? And so Van Gogh is seeing what is around him in terms of quite a big kind of value system. He looks at the landscape and he sees peace and majesty. Majesty is quite a big word to use in terms of countryside. I mean, it's not as though he's looking at Mount Everest or the Grand Canyon or Yosemite. You know, he's talking about just a kind of ordinary countryside that's in front of him, calling it majestic and peaceful. And so what is majesty? Well, it is a combination of things. It is dignity, it is grandeur, it is lofty, right? All those kinds of things. An imposing character. And so he says, but adding as well a feeling so individual, so heartbreaking. And so it's almost like he sees the landscape outside his window. It's almost like beckoning. It's this free space where birds and bees and maybe farmers and perhaps some farm animals come and go as they please. And he's looking at it almost from the perspective of a prisoner, that this is my life now, confinement, kind of illness, a kind of being tethered to something, some burden, and out there is health and freedom and life and opportunity, and that is now beyond those bars. And so he says there's a feeling that is so individual and so heartbreaking. And then he says, I have no aversion to that sort of emotion. So he's seeing a countryside outside his window before sunrise. He's seeing a morning star, and it's calling to him. It's making him, it's very evocative. It's making him feel feelings of heartbreak, but also majesty and peace and even intimacy. Maybe in a way feels safe and feels secure and feels at home in this little town that is different to all, and somehow it's going to be his new home. Then he says, I am always filled with remorse, terribly so, when I think of my work as being so little in harmony with what I should have liked to do. And so there is another hint that he's suddenly moved to want to produce something of significance. He's thinking about his whole body of work, right? He's thinking about his entire archive, and he's thinking, well, so little of it is in harmony with what I should have liked to do. Now, I can tell you when I was a little boy, I had quite a few encounters with my great uncle, who is the son of a master artist from South Africa, Tinus de Jong. He was the son of that artist. And so he had a lot of my great-great-grandfather's paintings, lived in this beautiful Tudor house in Newlands in Cape Town. He was very wealthy as well, but he had some massive artworks that were, really huge. One of them was somebody crossing the Alps. Can't quite remember, some well-known historical figure crossing the Alps. Maybe one of you guys know that. And my brother at that time was becoming a self-taught artist as well. I've got memories of my brother, you know, a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old sitting on the brick paving in our front garden with a palette knife, a new palette knife, and scraping it on the bricks to make it sharper, but also to make it more kind of flexible. And then copying him, and my brother was now embarking on oil paintings, and I was now also I'd been drawing a lot of with pencil and that sort of thing, and now it was making the transition to watercolor and oils and canvases. And my brother could maybe make that transition as a whatever he was, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. I was 9 or 10 years old, and I just didn't have the capability to learn those sort of techniques as such a young child. And at the same time, I actually felt exactly like Van Gogh did. I kind of felt like there are things I want to express, but I just don't know whether painting a tree is going to say what I want to say. There are things there are things that I feel. I just don't know whether a landscape is going to articulate the detail that I have in my heart, right? I remember thinking that as a really small child. And then at a certain point, getting frustrated because I also tried to paint with oils and try to paint with watercolors and try to use charcoal and so on. That was when I started reading a lot and also writing. And then I sort of felt writing, I think, although writing was hard and I was making the same mistakes early writers make, which is flowery, overly descriptive language, etc. I'd at least felt that I think I can harmonize what I want to say with what I'm writing, or harmonize, yeah. And so it's quite interesting, this situation that he's in. But the important thing to emphasize is this is what he's thinking: is I've got these great concepts in my mind, and I haven't been able to harmonize what I'm thinking and feeling so far in my art. And this is what he's thinking and feeling 2 weeks before Starry Night. So this is actually already the beginning of it. He's starting, is seeing the landscape, he's seeing the star, is feeling strong feelings of remorse, terrible feelings of remorse, that his work's not up to scratch, and now he wants to make a real effort. Hey, Pauline. Pauline says, I think life was painful for Vincent because he felt things so deeply. Absolutely. Okay, so then he goes on to say, I think that you would do well. Hang on, he says, I hope that in the long run this will make me do better things. Well, there you have it. He's wanting to execute something special. I don't know why, but there's a part of me that thought, did Vincent just paint Starry Night and he didn't really think very much of it? It's quite hard to imagine that because it's such a seminal work and it's quite different to a lot of his other art. I mean, it has qualities of his other art, but it also is in a way a step above, if you know what I mean. Anyway, he goes on to say, I think that you would do well to wash the canvases, which are quite dry, with water and a little spirits of wine to take away the oil and the spirit in the impasto. The same for the night cafe. And do you remember that picture? It was basically quite a long time ago. I mean, this was the cafe basically right next to the yellow house. He was painting a scene where, you remember he was saying it's a place where men could go mad and perhaps commit a crime. And of course, look at all the bottles of alcohol. Everyone's drinking, and he's got kind of a bar right below his house, and how much did he drink when he was there. And then he says, the green vineyard, the landscape that was in the walnut frame, night also. Okay, I'm not quite sure what that's about. But that has been retouched recently and might run with the spirits of wine. It's almost a whole month since I came here. Not once has the least desire to be elsewhere come to me. Only the wish to work is getting a scrap stronger. So I don't know whether he's been allowed to go into that field that he's seeing from his window. I mean, do you remember what Dr. Peyron said? We'll give him another 2 weeks. Where does he say? I think he said that to Theo, but he basically says here, I promised him that I would allow him to go see different points of view outside the establishment. And this was the 26th of May. We are now a week after that. And so he's saying, I do not notice in the others either any very definite desire to be anywhere else. And this may well come from the feeling that we are too thoroughly shattered for life outside. What I cannot understand is their absolute idleness. And so this again shows how he's different to his fellow, almost want to say cellmates, but it's patience. He is busy. He is reading. He is planning and plotting the next artwork. His mind is busy on matters of the palette and textures and artistic kind of motifs. And then he says, but that is the great fault of the South and its ruin. But what a lovely country, and what lovely blue, and what a sun. Look at these words and how they evoke Starry Night. Just look at those words. What a lovely country, what lovely blue, and what a sun. So in a way, he is sharing the same space with the Frenchmen of the South, and he says they are ungrateful, or they don't appreciate what they have. And he comes from the very bathroomy, sort of dripping, drain pipe, waterlogged Netherlands, right? And I don't say that in a nasty way. I'm Dutch myself. I've been to the Netherlands, and it is very waterlogged and probably not fun to be in winter. Very overcast, muddy, gray, but mostly gray. And it's the sunshine. I think it's the sunshine, but it's also the fact that the Netherlands is so flat, that it makes a contrast to the south of France, which has tallish mountains and different kind of landscape. And so he appreciates it. He's feeling it. He's feeling. Look at the time of the year. It's early June. He's feeling the landscape coming alive into the full flush of summer, at the same time that he is kind of losing his life, losing his freedom, having to be indoors. The outside is bursting, right? And he's feeling that, he's seeing that. And that's why he says, what a lovely country, what a lovely blue, and what a sun. I don't think he'd be saying that even in the South in winter. He's saying it in the beginning of summer. And then he said, and yet I've only seen the garden and what I can look at through my window. And so it's also in terms of that he almost is yearning for the burgeoning beauty outside his window, which makes him almost fall in love with it, almost obsess about it. He, at this moment, is actually a prisoner. He's not being allowed out. And so he starts to pine in a way for what he's seeing outside the window. And he's not just glancing out the window now and then. You can actually imagine him sitting for long hours in silence, looking through the bars, watching the stars fade away and the countryside fill with light, and probably does it a few times, right? And so he certainly is experiencing something pretty poignant. It's a kind of joy in the landscape, but from the perspective that he's a prisoner, from the perspective that he can't actually reach that landscape. It's beyond him. It's almost like paradise or the heavens. He knows it's there, but he just can't get there, kind of thing, right? Then he says, have you read the new book by Guy de Maupassant, Strong as the Dead? What is the subject of it? The last thing I read is that category was Zola's The Dream. Now, isn't there something very dreamlike about Starry Night as well? So the other thing that's going on besides his own feelings are some of the words of the authors that he's reading, some of the concepts that they are imparting through their narrative. And so Vincent wants to come up with something original, something special, something unique, something that's his. But with all of these elements, the countryside, what does he, how does is he refer, what a sun. What does he say as well about the star? Nothing but the morning star. He's seeing the stars, he's seeing the sunrise, he's seeing the sun throbbing over the landscape, fill it with light. He's reading books about the dream. He's feeling that he really wants to say something that is in harmony. He wants to paint a picture that is in harmony with what he is feeling. And then he says, I thought the figure of the woman, the one who did embroidery, very, very beautiful. And the description of the embroidery, all in gold, just because it is, as it were, a question of the color of the different yellows, whole and broken up. Look at that as well. A question of the color of the different yellows, whole and broken up. And I mean, are these not kind of broken up yellows? I don't know if you guys can see that. If you think about the worlds, they are yellows that are, I mean, if I just look at that, it paints them in little lines like that, which gives a sense of twinkling stars, of whirling galaxies. But the figure of the man did not seem very lifelike, and the great cathedral also gave me the blues. Now, there's some people that believe the great cypress tree that sort of billows up through the foreground of Starry Night is some kind of allegory to the Eiffel Tower, that Van Gogh despised the Eiffel Tower, he thought it was ugly, or that it was some kind of reference to, in a way, the church, almost like seeing the church as nature, rather than something made of brick and mortar. Anyway, then he says, only that contrast of lilac and blue-black. And I mean, isn't that blue-black? Well, I don't know if it's blue-black, but certainly the tree in the foreground is a kind of very dark figure in the front. Anyway, he talks about make the blonde figure stand out. After all, there are things like that in Lamartine. Lamartine is the kind of the square where the yellow house is. That's where the night cafe was painted. If you look over here, night cafe on Place Lamartine. And of course, Place Lamartine was bombed during the Second World War, which is why the Yellow House no longer exists. Anyway, then he says, I hope that you will destroy a lot of the things that are too bad in the batch I've sent you, or at least only show what is most passable. As for the exhibition of the independence, it's all one to me. Just act as if it weren't there. So as not to be indifferent and not to exhibit anything too mad. Interesting choice of words. Perhaps the Starry Night, and yeah, he's referring to Starry Night over the Rhone. So he's actually just executed a Starry Night over water. And you can hear that he's kind of thinking about stars and suns and the evocative landscape all over again. And then he says, and the landscape with the yellow verdure, which was in the walnut frame. Since there are two with contrasting colors, it might give somebody else the idea of doing those night effects better than I have. And look at that. The idea of doing those night effects better. That's what is going on in his mind right now. Isn't this quite incredible that he really is preparing his headspace, his heart space, his inner artist is being prepped for launch, right? And then he says, but you must absolutely set your mind at rest about me now. When I've received the new canvas and the paint, I'm going off to see a little of the country. Since it is just the season when there are plenty of flowers and consequently color effects, it would perhaps be wise to send me 5 meters more of canvas. Thanks, Jody. For the flowers are short-lived and will be replaced by the yellow wheat fields. Those especially I hope to catch better than I did in Arles. Here again, he is kind of talking about wanting to do a better job. He wants to execute better. And I have to say, even today, I was reading through some book reviews and just thinking, was it really that bad? Like, was my writing really that bad? And then thinking, I need to do better, or I want to do better. Not that I agree with the reviews, but just that I know I'm capable of work that is wholly impressive. Um, and obviously when you're writing certain kind of books and you've got to use certain techniques and certain devices, like the ravens in the Doubt series, people who don't understand why you're doing that or what you're doing, it just totally goes over their heads. Someone was saying to me, in terms of sarcasm, just saying, I get what you're saying, but a lot of people won't, and so you should be careful. You know, the people who don't get it will be put off, kind of thing. Anyway, he goes on to say the mistral, that's the wind, since there are some mountains, seems much less tiresome than in Arles, where you always get it firsthand. Well, the mistral in Saint-Remy might not be a big deal, but I can tell you, you know, in the true crime space, we're dealing with Jay Slater. This trip, this bicycle ride from Arles to Saint-Remy was incredibly innovating, to use a word that he wrote in one of his letters yesterday that we dealt with yesterday. I felt incredibly drained, fatigued, exhausted by just this. I mean, I totally underestimated the bike ride to Saint-Remy. And I mean, the people in the Airbnb said, don't go that route, go that route. And of course, I went the route that they said I shouldn't go. And it was just such a interminable climb, which was made so much harder by the mistral, by this headwind. And so you're pedaling uphill on a long uphill, and the wind's blowing really hard against you. And eventually I was so exhausted. I mean, I ran out of food. I was so exhausted. I was eventually pushing the bike, but like pushing the bike and then resting my head on the handlebars. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. It's like Saint-Rémy's just there, just go a little bit further. And I don't know, I was really at the end of my rope, really. And so that's one of the reasons why when I actually got to Saint-Rémy, I kind of just had to go back to All, because otherwise I'd be cycling in the dark. You can't see it in the picture behind me, but there's the sun is barely above the horizon. And I actually did get to All in the dark, and it was fairly cold as well. But I think Saint-Rémy being on the other side of those mountains made it to some extent. I think if you're on that side of the mountain, it's protected, whereas on the other side, the Mistral almost like ramps over and then blows like hell down the other side. I just remember that being, although it was epic, it was also kind of nightmarish, because it was so tough and so hard. It was incredibly hard. What does Mel say? Sorry to hear your hands are painful. Glad that you caught it as well, Mel. Okay, so let's continue. So then he says, when you receive the canvases that I've done in the garden, you will see that I'm not too melancholy here. Goodbye for the present, a good handshake in thought for you and Joe. Ever yours, Vincent. A sketch of a nude seen from the back was enclosed. You've got to wonder what that's all about. Like, why is he sketching a nude? Is he thinking about the woman in All that he gave his ear? Is he thinking about someone that he's perhaps reading about? Because he does mention a blonde figure and so on. He says, I thought the figure of the woman, the one who did embroidery, very, very beautiful. So I guess that is what he's talking about. But this is the painting that I think he does when he's in All. I think so. The Poet's Garden. No, maybe not. Maybe not. I'm not sure whether does he paint that while he's in Saint-Rémy. I don't know. I mean, he's not near this park anymore, but maybe it's sketched it somewhere. Because I mean, he does say, have a look at the picture of the garden, and you'll see I'm not melancholy. Oh, actually, I see what he means. When you receive the canvases that I've done in the garden. Not sure if he means the canvases I've already sent. Doesn't he mean that? Anyway, let's go on to the next letter. So June 2nd, now we go on to June 5th. Reverend Sauls to Theo. Short letter. Dear sir, an absence that I've just taken has prevented me from answering you the letter of the 22nd and of carrying out your commission for the treasurer of the hospice. I'm happy to hear the news that you gave me of your brother. I really wanted to hear about him. So obviously Theo is also saying to the Reverend, he's doing well, so far so good kind of thing. I hope that one day or another he will write to me to give me news of himself directly. So obviously Van Gogh has even made a bit of an impression on the Reverend, right? Then he says, I paid the treasurer the balance that was due, 20 francs 45 for your brother's keep, but I didn't find it necessary to give him anything to the nurses who care for him. I've received from you in total 100 francs, 50 francs from the 200 sent at the time of the departure for Saint-Remy. There I only spent 7 francs for your brother's journey, and that is obviously by carriage, and mine to Saint-Remy, and then the 20 francs, blah, 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 for the here included bill. I have therefore 72 francs 55 of yours left. I wondered if I should send this sum or keep it in the event that your brother needs me to send him something from here. I would welcome your instructions on this. So if anything, the Reverend's actually got some extra cash. It's not like he's asking for more money. He's saying, I've got some extra money. What do you want me to do with it? And then he says, I would welcome your instructions. I'm writing this word in a hurry. I ask you, my dear sir, to accept my very cordial greetings. Okay, so that's the 5th of June. Now we all the way up to the 9th of June. Guys, we are now less than a week from Starry Night. So this is one of the most important letters in the run-up to Starry Night, which is going to tell us what's going on in his heart, in his mind, in his spirit. Let's get to that. My dear Theo, many thanks for the package of canvases, brushes, tobacco, and chocolate, which reached me in a good condition. Now, can you imagine if at this point, can you imagine if Vincent has said, please, this is urgent. I beg you, please send me, I need half a dozen paintbrushes. I need these colors, those colors, those colors. Can you imagine if, for whatever reason, Theo just didn't get to it? He fell ill, or Joe caught a cold, or the two of them went on a romantic retreat, or there was some drama at work, or for whatever reason, Theo just didn't get round to sending Vincent what he needed to paint, right? Can you imagine that? So the stars are aligning, pun intended. The soup in the artist's kind of the sort of artistic juices are starting to brew, to kind of react, right? And he's now ready to produce something special, but he just doesn't have anything to work with. What would he have done? Also, can you imagine if Vincent had gotten an attack at this point? Just maybe instead of looking out the window, he was just thinking about, maybe he was staring at his ear all day, or just fixating and kind of, what's the word, gnawing on unhappy subject matter. I'm stuck here, woe is me, whatever. So many things could have gone the other way. And so anyway, Theo sends canvases, brushes, tobacco, chocolate, everything that Vincent needs to get to work, to be a happy camper, a happy artist, eating chocolate, smoking his pipe while he's painting. I was very glad of them, for I was feeling a little low after working. Also, I've been out for several days working in the neighborhood. So he's also been out, and now is really feeling pretty positive about everything. The fact that he was out in the neighborhood is probably a sign that Peyron has kind of given him a vote of confidence. And this is also going to give him a sense of purpose and passion and possibility, that there's magic in the universe. Maybe there's enough magic for me, right? And then he says, your last letter, if I remember correctly, was dated May 21st. I've had no more news of you since, except only that Monsieur Peyron told me he had a letter from you. I hope you are well, and your wife too. Monsieur Peyron intends to go to Paris to see the exhibition, and he will pay you a visit then. Just think about the irony. His kind of warden is going to Paris, where Theo is, and he's going to see an art exhibition, and Vincent isn't and can't, and further won't, for month after month after month after month after month. And he's obviously also going to miss the World Fair exhibition. Hey, Iceland, good to see you. I must say, Iceland, I was looking at some pictures you put on Facebook. You've got a beautiful home, some nice pictures on the wall as well. Anyway, he says, what news can I tell you? Not much. I'm working on 2 landscapes, views taken in the hills. One is the country that I see from the window of my bedroom. So already, this is kind of his first attempt, really, at drawing what he's seeing outside his window. And this is what it is. And that is, in a way, Starry Night. Well, let's call it Cloudy Day. This is Cloudy Day instead of Starry Night, right? Mountainous landscape behind St. Paul Hospital. I think it should be Saint Remy, shouldn't it? But anyway, so then he says, in the foreground, a field of wheat ruined and hurled to the ground by a storm. So there's this restlessness in the atmosphere that he's aware of. The wheat ruined and sort of perhaps whirled in a way. I don't know if you've ever seen grass that has been kind of trampled on by storms and rain and weather. It kind of looks a little bit like whirl sometimes. And then he says, and so look at the chaos here and think about Starry Night. That is, hasn't he done this in the sky? And I mean, look how tumultuous the sky is as well, how disturbed the sky is as well, how stormy the sky is as well. I wonder if there's not just a better version of this. Just don't really like the I don't like Web Exhibit's version of it. Let's see if we can find a better one. Yeah, I think that is a lot better. How's that? So now you get a much clearer sense of what he was doing, don't you? And although the palette is somewhat gray, there's quite a lot going on in this picture. So this is a precursor to Starry Night. And as I say, let's call it Cloudy Day. You can see there's that same whirliness going on in the sky. The mountains even are sort of doing this a little bit. And then this as well. Look at this, right? It really is a beautiful painting. And it's so balanced. It's got the sky, and then it's got this middle ground of rolling hills. These are the hills I cycled over, by the way. They're not to be sniffed at. And then the foreground. We don't see that cypress here, but it's certainly the view that he's talking about, right? And then he says, a boundary wall, and beyond the grey foliage of a few olive trees, some huts in the hills. Then at the top of the canvas, a great white and grey cloud floating in the azure. He says, it is a landscape of extreme simplicity in colouring too, that will make a pendant to the study of the bedroom which has got damaged. When the thing is represented in point of character, absolutely in agreement, and one with the manner of representing it, isn't it just that which gives a work of art its quality? Excuse me. So is looking for the lack of a better word, congruence, harmony, something simple that is nevertheless integrated in some way, right? Then he says, that is why, as far as painting goes, a household loaf is especially good when it is painted by Chardin. Now, what makes Egyptian art, for instance, extraordinary isn't it that these serene, calm kings, wise and gentle, patient and kind, look as though they could never be other than what they are, eternal tillers of the soil, worshippers of the sun. And so, in a weird way, he's almost mainlining into almost ancient motifs, like this almost ancient idea of great men through the passage of time worshipping. Well, when I say worship, I don't mean literally praying to the sun, but basically being very reverent, very aware, very respectful, very captivated by the heavens, whether that's the heavens by day or the heavens by night, right? And that is again the mind space he's in, the headspace he's in, that's taking him towards Starry Night. Instead of him being a worshipper of the sun, Starry Night is a worship of the stars, the galaxies, the universe, the heavens, right? Then he goes on to say, I should so have liked to have seen an Egyptian house at the exhibition constructed by Jules Garnier, the architect, painted in red, yellow, and blue, with a garden regularly divided into beds by rows of bricks, the dwelling place of beings whom we know only as mummies or in granite. So he's actually exploring very advanced concepts of humanity. He's thinking of certain races of man as beings that are almost like aliens, almost like entities that I mean, it's us, but they're sort of hard to know. They are so lost in time and in their time that they become kind of recondite, right? And then by then, to come back to the point, the Egyptian artists having faith, working by feeling and by instinct, express all these intangible things. Well, that's exactly what he imbues Starry Night with, intangible things. I mean, when you look up to the stars, can you see that a star is a planet? Can you see that a star is a galaxy? Or a prick of light is a galaxy? Can you see that a star is a black hole or has some rings around it or something? And so he's trying to express these intangible things, the electricity, the clockwork of the universe, something that has just become known in his time, in the same way that in our time, Mars, like on Twitter, they've just shown, or on X, they've just shown some very detailed, like you can even see the grains of sand, and not flecks of frost, but certainly you can see quite clearly frost on Mars. And that's something we've never seen before. And so for the first time, he's thinking about the heavens in a kind of a scientific way. But it's suddenly the heavens have become more great and more majestic. And majestic is a word that is used a moment ago, that there's majesty in the sky as well as on the land. And so he's also talking about having faith, working by feeling and by instinct, express all these intangible things. He needs right now, doesn't he, to have faith in whatever process is going on. And it's kind of like walking a tightrope. You know, he is poised for disaster. He is going to unravel slowly. He's going to get sicker and sicker. He's going to have all sorts of attacks. And how can I put it? He's going to deteriorate it's almost like he's going to rot in this asylum. And for a while, it's going to look like he's going to die there. You know, it's a pretty grim fate that awaits him, right? And of course, he doesn't die there. And of course, for some reason, he turns the corner and he comes out, perhaps because it's summer, perhaps because for some strange reason the syphilis retreats, perhaps because he stops going to Al and he stops seeing prostitutes when he's there, and he finally learns his lesson. I actually took some photos of the weaver bird female today. I was going to share them with you, but I couldn't get any good shots. I took photos of the male, but he was so excited he wouldn't stay in one place for long enough. So that's why I'm not going to show it to you. But I did get some photos of the female, and I couldn't help looking at her and thinking, you are the cause of all this nonsense. You're the cause of all of this effort. And, I mean, this poor little bird is being driven to distraction, building these nests, and you're the one who's going, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And I couldn't help thinking how much of Van Gogh's horror show is woman. I mean, you've just painted a picture of a naked woman. How much of what is eating at him is because he's alone in the kind of, in not the carnal sense, but in terms of companionship, intimacy as well, but also companionship. And so where he is at this point is he talks about having faith, working by feeling and by instinct. And I think if you told him the facts, if you'd pitched up my true crime rocket science, what do you call it, adherents, or whatever you want to call yourselves, the true crime rocket science folks here, if you had said, you know what, we need to think critically, we need to be authentic, and you'd knocked on the asylum door, and you'd had an opportunity to meet Van Gogh, and you went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, you know what, it's not looking good. I think he's got epilepsy, blah, blah, blah. And let's say you could even look into the future, and you knew that in February, everything is getting worse. Would you tell him that? Would you inform Van Gogh of his fate? And a lot of people would say, I think I have the right to know. It's almost like if you've got a terminal illness. Tell me the result of these tests. Tell me what awaits me, right? And yet I think if you could tell Van Gogh, I don't know if that would have been very good for him. And so instead, what is driving him is faith, working by feeling and instinct, kind of intuitive thing. And guess what? It does actually stand him in good stead, ultimately. Of course, I don't know whether he's getting kind of fresh injections of syphilis every time he goes back to Arles and goes to a brothel. I don't know if that's actually what's going on. So if you'd said to him, you've got something really serious going on, maybe you would have said, okay, well, I need to take this seriously. But anyway, when he talks about intangible things, he talks about kindness, infinite wisdom, infinite patience, wisdom, serenity. Look at that word, serenity, and think about Starry Night. And then he says, by a few knowing curves and by the marvelous proportions. And if you think about it, Starry Night is all about curves, worlds. Even the tree in the front looks like a flame. That is to say, once more, when the thing represented and the manner of representing it agree, the thing has style and quality. What incredible sentiments. This is not a crazy dude who can't express himself. He's very, very articulate. And he is now expressing the DNA of Starry Night. Isn't it wonderful? Liesel, good to see you. Liesel, I actually really need to show your picture of Alaska. Alas, I can't do it from here. Maybe I can do it from here. Here it is. So guys, we're only going to have one photo today. We've had one really beautiful painting so far. We're going to have one photo, and that is Liesel's. One of Liesel can tell us a bit about this photo, what it was like actually being there. Very appropriate color to this channel, right? It looks very warm, is it? It looks very, I don't know if you can see, these mountains are actually covered in snow. And yet you've got this fiery ness around it. That is from Liesel. So you can give her a little bit of credit for this beautiful picture. So Silent Murmur says the stars and planets weren't unknown. I don't think you're following what I'm saying. It seems like you just dismiss what I know about this. Some scientific progress had been made in terms of seeing what's out in space as things like spiral galaxies, and so the knowledge of astronomy had been extended, and that is what he's keying into. So if you're going to sort of be dismissive and say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, they've known about planets forever. Actually, there was some, like I've just said about, anyway, I'm just not going to. Anyway, let's continue here. He says, so also the servant girl in Lay's great fresco, once she is engraved by Bracamond, becomes a new work of art, or the little reader by Meissonier, when it is Jacquemart who engraves it, since the manner of engraving is one with the thing represented. As I wish to preserve the study of the bedroom, if you would send it back to me rolled up when they are sending some more canvas again, I will copy it. At first, I had wished to have it re-canvassed because I did not think I could do it again. But as my brain has grown calmer since, I can quite well do it again now. The thing is that among the number of things you make, there are always some that you felt more or put more into, and that you want to keep in spite of everything. He's saying there's a certain priority in terms of the things that he's created. And I guess he's trying to go back to that place where he can make special paintings, right? Among the number of things you make, there are always some that you felt more or put more into, that make you want to keep them in spite of everything. When I see a picture that interests me, I can never help asking myself, in what house, room, corner of a room, in whose home would it do well? Would it be in the right place? Thus, the pictures of Hals, Rembrandt, van der Meer, Vermeer, I think that's what he means by van der Meer, are only at home in an old Dutch house. I must say, I really like Vermeer. In fact, I prefer Vermeer to Van Gogh, just my kind of art. Now, as to the Impressionists, once again, if an interior is not complete without a work of art, neither is a picture complete. You see how he's coming back to this idea of harmony. Neither is a picture complete if it is not in harmony with surroundings originating in and resulting from the period in which it was produced. And I do not know if the Impressionists are better than their time, or on the contrary, are not yet so good. So it's almost like he wants to be on the cutting edge of art in a way, right? In a word, are their minds and interiors of homes more important than anything that has been expressed by painting? I'm inclined to think so. I've seen the announcement of a coming expedition of Impressionists called Gauguin, Bernard, Anquetin, and others. So I am inclined to think that a new sect has again been formed, no less infallible than those already existing. Was that the exhibition you spoke of? What Storms in Teacups? Isn't that a snipe at Gauguin? That he's almost referring to Gauguin as a storm in a teacup. Isn't he? Isn't that what he's saying? I must say, I do sometimes feel that you feel like people have no respect for what you know, and that people, I don't know, think that that your opinion is just incredibly average. Um, if you've written a book, so what? So what? You wrote a book, and I must say, in that sense, I really feel Van Gogh's pain, because like, I'm in my 50s now, and I really feel that I lost about 10 years of my life. It's like, felt like 10 years of death. Obviously, I produced work during those 10 years, but to have people shit on your work, and basically, I saw someone in the comments, sorry to go down this road, but to have somebody kind of say, are you going to say how many books you wrote again, kind of thing. And somebody else in a parting shot was just saying, oh, how you feel sorry for yourself because I'm not getting what I deserve or whatever. Now, I must say, if you if you write whatever, 20 books, 30 books, 50 books, and you spend so much of your life force doing that, and you don't really get something out of it, and you say that's okay. It's almost like saying, I don't mind going to prison for 10 years for a crime I didn't commit. I don't mind. I don't mind losing 10 years of my life. It's literally like, I worked on these books, and I didn't like sit there going, I've written a book, I don't care what happens to that one. I'm writing another book. I don't really mean anything I'm saying. None of it really means anything. I'll write another book just so that I can say I've written so many books. If you come out of that and you say, that didn't cost you something, and I don't really care how much it did cost, then I don't know, then you're a zombie to begin with. Then you like you're a dead zombie to begin with. And so to have people kind of come afterwards, and then they literally shit on your work, like in the sense of, um, as far as I'm concerned, your work is worthless, feels like that was wasted effort. And I know a lot of you here, you are not the problem. You are definitely not the problem. It does make one feel, I never ever want to waste another whatever week, month, year, hopefully not more than that, writing ever again. I mean, that's kind of what you come away with. And Van Gogh kind of has the same thing, where he feels this terrible remorse, where he feels like, if only I'd just done better, maybe if I'd just done a little bit better, I would have gotten myself over the finish line and I wouldn't be in this predicament. That's kind of how he's feeling. He's feeling like, couldn't I have just done a little more, right? And the irony is how much he's already done, how much he's already achieved, and he's one painting away from an incredible triumph in art history. But how does he feel? He feels kind of like a loser. He feels less than average. He feels like a nobody. And he refers to himself in the asylum quite often as a nobody. And then there's somewhere where he kind of comes out of that and he says, I want to show the world what this nobody, and obviously when he says that, it's a reference to how he knows he's being perceived, what this nobody is capable of. I'm just trying to convey in a very real, practical sense that the education I got researching all the books that I wrote, writing all the books that I wrote, didn't come cheap. I remember telling Lisa Wilson when we were writing these books, I said, I feel like I'm shedding blood. I feel like I'm bleeding to death. It feels like a living death, this, right? And the only thing worse than that is having your work literally shat on, right? By people who just, it's like you cover Ernest Becker on the other channel, and people don't understand it, and they say, "What's this waffle?" kind of thing. And you might say, "Wow, calm down. Like, why are you getting so upset?" If you don't get upset, like if you've done your job, right? You know what you've done, you understand it, you educated, you've done the work. Someone comes along and they just don't get it, and another person comes along and just doesn't get it. It kind of ends up being wasted time and effort. I mean, maybe one day it'll be recognized, or maybe it'll never be recognized, and maybe it is terrible. But if you don't care about the value of your own work, then there's something wrong with you. And so to mock someone for caring about their work doesn't really make any sense. It's almost like, wow, you're really arrogant to believe in yourself. If you had to apply that to Van Gogh, like right now, and say, "Tish, I can't believe it. You're in an asylum. Wake up. It's over. You are not an artist. You can't paint. Get the memo, pal." Is that a case of the world doesn't understand him, or the world really is going to have to catch up maybe over decades? It's going to take the world 50 years to kind of figure out, wow, this is actually not bad, right? But can you imagine if someone could actually knock on the asylum door and say, "Jeepers, can't you see what you're doing? You're such an arrogant narcissist. How many paintings are you still going to paint before you realize how pathetic and useless you are?" Right? And can you imagine if that fell onto not deaf ears, where he said, "Damn, you're right. I kind of had this Starry Night picture in mind, but you know what? You've just convinced me. I think I'm going to go and become a soldier." In other words, if the sort of average person had actually infected him with their averageness. Anyway, a little bit of a rant there, but I think what it does touch on is that intensity of feeling that I'm sure he was feeling. And it's unfortunate that he didn't feel more sense of anger about the position that he's kind of been put in. But of course, a lot of it is also his own fault, right? He chose to live the lifestyle that he chose to live. And one's got to also take responsibility for that. But there is a little bit of anger where he talks about Gauguin, his pal Gauguin, as a storm in a teacup, which is something we don't see very often from him. And then he talks a little bit about himself. He says, "My health is all right, considering I feel happier here with my work than I could be outside. By staying here a good long time, I shall have learned regular habits, and in the long run, the result will be more order in my life and less susceptibility. That will be so much to the good. Besides, I should not have the courage to begin again outside. I went once, still accompanied to the village. The mere sight of people and things had such an effect on me that I thought I was going to faint." So can you see just how intense he is? He's being so affected by what is around him, right? The village, the mere sight of people, it's almost like he's so overcome with. Remember, we said yesterday that artists kind of have all of these pipes, all of these channels completely open, and they can be very overwhelmed by what they experience. They don't really know how, although it seems like they've got a gift, it's actually that they don't really know how to turn those taps and sort of close them off, whereas other people can't actually open them. They kind of get the experience of life always through like a manageable trickle. And so this is exactly what is experienced in Saint-Remy. He goes into the village. I must say, when I went kind of through on my bicycle, I went through Saint-Remy, and I kind of had a very weird experience. It was just so beautiful. there were so many people just sitting in the cafes, and I just had this incredibly tough cycle there, and I couldn't stay. I couldn't even stay and have a coffee. That's why I would really like to go back, just to be in. I mean, I went all the way to Saint Remy, and when I got there, I had to leave because the sun was setting. Um, and there were all these people that were having this pleasant experience. They were drinking coffee and eating croissants and sitting kind of in the sort of outdoor tables, and the sun was just setting. And if I was there in a car or could catch a bus, then I could have also taken my time. And so I wouldn't say I thought I was going to faint because it had such an effect on me, but I was certainly so exhausted that I was there was a little bit of that aspect that I was very, very low on energy if I wasn't careful. And so he says, I felt very ill. I felt very ill just being exposed to the kind of traffic of this little village. Face to face with nature, it is the feeling for work that supports me. One wonders whether, when he says the mere sight of people, and obviously it's not mad people, one wonders whether he doesn't get a sense of terror that that he's just been thrown out of one town, treated like a pariah in one town, and he sees these other people and he wonders, are people really the enemy? Are people going to always, I don't know, reject me, hate me, misunderstand me, whatever? And he sees them, feels faint, and feels very ill. Because if you think about it, when he goes to Orvez, he does have there is kind of an incident with Dr. Gachet where they kind of have a big argument. And he is ultimately, I believe, shot. And so isn't that terror, that aversion, that fear of people, isn't it to some extent well-founded? Anyway, he says, face to face with nature, it is the feeling for work that supports me. But anyway, this is to show you that there must have been within me some too powerful emotion to upset me like that. And I have no idea what can have caused it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just the syphilis that is sort of developing, that is causing him to, I don't know, if he gets excited, it kind of gets the better of him in a way. It says, I get bored to death sometimes after working, and yet I have no desire to begin again. The doctor who's just called says that he is not going to Paris for several weeks, so do not expect his visit yet. I hope you will write me soon. During this month, I shall really again be in need for, now these are definitely going to be used in Starry Night, flake white, malachite green, yellow ochre, red ochre, ultramarine, cobalt, raw sienna, ivory black. He wants a lot of green. He wants a lot of white and a fair bit of yellow as well, and blue. Then he says, it is queer that every time I try to reason with myself to get a clear idea of things, why I came here, that's also what's going on in his mind. He's trying to get a clear idea of things. Why did I come here? And that after all, it is only an accident like any other. A terrible dismay and horror seizes me and prevents me from thinking. And so when he kind of takes stock, when he kind of appreciates what's going on, he actually kind of almost has a panic attack. He feels this terrible disappointment. He's overtaken by like a crawling sense of horror that, and then he can't even think. It's like this terrible storm in his own mind. He says, it's true that this is tending to diminish slightly, but it is also seems to me to prove that there's quite definitely something or other deranged in my brain. And I think what is going on is it's not like one thing. It's a combination of the syphilis, which is kind of short-circuiting and so on, and then also the real anxiety, which is also not coming about in a vacuum. Of course, as syphilis gets worse and these attacks gets worse, it tends to create more anxiety, which makes it like a runaway effect. But then there is, of course, what happened in the real world, the very real Holocaust of him losing his ear, losing his friend, losing the yellow house, losing his place in awe. All of that is pretty, and all within the context of his brother suddenly living happily ever after. It's like quite a shocking trauma to have to deal with just like that. And so all of these things together are, he can't wrap his head around it. And really what he needs to do is try and manage his anxiety and then also manage his health. Don't go out, don't go and womanize, don't drink, don't worry about things, just try and recover. But that's easier said than done. And obviously there are moments where he's going to feel stronger, and then what's he going to want to do? He's going to want to go out. And so in a way, the fact that he was allowed to leave the asylum is in a way going to prolong, I think, the severity of the syphilis, because what does he do when he goes beyond the asylum? I mean, you might say, well, he just goes into the landscape and paints, but then he gets more freedom and maybe goes away for a weekend. What do you think he does, right? What do you think he does? He goes on to say, it is astounding to be afraid of nothing like this and to be unable to remember things. And so that is also pretty traumatic. He can't remember things. Only you may be sure I shall do all I can to become active again. I shall do all I can to become active again. And perhaps useful, at least in the sense that I want to do better pictures than before. And there you have it in black and white. You know, whatever is saying, whatever you can even call it nonsense, whatever the run up to this statement, the bottom line is this: I want to do better pictures than before. I don't know why I've done that. And this statement is really an expression of intent, an expression of mission, an expression of purpose. And it comes just before Starry Night. You guys get that? Are you guys getting this sense of the sort of portentousness of what is going on? That it didn't just happen sort of, it didn't just happen by a fluke or luck, or that he had like a random mad feeling and then something happened. It's something that was kind of by design, right? And right here are the portents of that, right? What is portentous? It is foreshadowing, something that is hinting at something that is about to happen, right? So basically a foreshadowing. I think I can maybe get a bit more out of portent. There you have it. I just saw it a moment ago. Is it this one? Something that is portentous is important in indicating or affecting future events. So it's a perfect word for what we're talking about, right? And that's it. I want to do better pictures than before. Is Starry Night a better picture than before? In this country, and arguably you would say it's his best picture. In this country, there are many things that often make you think of Racedahl, but the figures of the laborers are absent. Everywhere at home and at times of the year, you see men, women, children, and animals at work. And yeah, not a third of that. And besides, it is not the genuine work of the North. They seem to work here with languid, clumsy hands without energy. He's been talking about energy quite a lot. He's saying, wow, the idleness here bothers me. He says, perhaps this is a wrong idea I've got hold of, not belonging to the country. Anyhow, I hope so. But this makes things colder than one would think when reading Tartarin. But perhaps he had been exiled with his whole family for many long years. Above all, write me soon, because your letter is very slow in coming. So can you see, is feeling a little bit of a gap, a bit of a separation, a bit of a lack of concentration from his brother, that his brother isn't quite as engaged as he has been, and that's not surprising. I hope you are well. It is a great consolation to me to know that you are not living alone anymore. If some month or other it should be too difficult to send me paint, canvas, etc., then do not send them, for believe me, it is better to live than to work at art in the abstract. That's kind of what I was saying a bit earlier. It is better to live than just to, at some point, you've also got to come alive in your life. Like, work isn't life. Life is life. Then he says, above all, your home must not be sad or dull. That first and painting after. Then I feel tempted to begin again with the simpler colors, the ochres, for instance. What color is ochre? What color is ochre? I'm not sure if it's my favorite Van Gogh color, but it's kind of that color, right? Or I think that's what ochre is. It's not ochre the color. Sorry, I'm not quite sure now. Is ochre the thing and ochre the color the same thing? I would think so, right? Ochre is kind of a yellow or gold color. Okay, that's what he's talking about. Think about gold and what gold represented to the Egyptians. When the Egyptians used gold, they were actually trying to show light, sunlight. It's not just put gold somewhere, it's trying to show light. Then he says, is a Van Goyen ugly because it is painted entirely in oils with very little neutral color? Or Michel, the shrubbery with the ivy is completely finished. Okay. I very much want to send it to you as soon as it's dry enough to be rolled up. So I guess that's what he's working on at that time. With a right good handshake for you and your wife, ever yours, Vincent. Okay. I don't think there are too many letters to go from this point. 16 June. So this is from Theo to Vincent, and the letter basically comes there a week later. It's fairly long in terms of their usual correspondence. And so he writes from Paris, my dear Vincent, it's a fairly short letter. It is a very, very long time since I ought to have written you a letter, but I've not been able to formulate my thoughts. There are moments when one's feelings are clear. It's quite interesting that Theo is almost saying the same thing that Vincent is. I'm struggling to formulate my thoughts. So you don't have to be mad to struggle to be clear-headed about certain ideas. He says there are moments when one's feelings are clear, but sometimes it is difficult to form an idea of what has taken shape in one's thoughts and what is still in a state of vagueness. And so this letter is coming, I'm not sure if it's just after or just before Starry Night. Did you guys know that? I'm also not sure of being able to write you in the way I should like to today, but my letter will be sent off anyway, if only to let you know that we think of you often and that your last pictures have given me much food for thought on the state of your mind at the time you did them. Isn't there something a little bit ominous about this letter? There's something different compared to the sort of kind of endorsement and encouragement. There's some kind of reservation, something conditional almost about this letter. It says, in all of them, there's a vigor in the colors which you have not achieved before. This in itself constitutes a rare quality, but you have gone further than that. And if there are some who try to find the symbolic by torturing the form, I find this in many of your canvases, namely in expression of the epitome of your thoughts on nature and living creatures, which you feel to be so strongly inherent in them. There is a clear and concise reference to the symbolism that is present in Van Gogh's art, something that you don't hear about very much. That something that you see in his art isn't just something, it represents something. But then he says, but how your brain must have labored and how you have risked everything to the very limit, where vertigo is inevitable. And so his brother is actually feeling like, I'm kind of worried. You are pushing things to the limit. Maybe we need to do something here. And then he says, vertigo is inevitable based on what you are doing. And then he says, for this reason, my dear brother, when you tell me that you're working again, in which from one point of view I rejoice, for by this you avoid lapsing into the state of mind which many of the poor wretches who are taken care of in the establishment where you are staying succumb to it, and there it is. It worries me a little to think about it, for you ought not to venture into the mysterious regions which it seems one may skim cautiously but not penetrate with impunity. He's almost saying you need to not take that sort of artistic streak, for the lack of a better word, and just willy-nilly go into flights of fancy. I mean, he's about to paint Starry Night, but and just to go into these domains with impunity, because your mind is starting to unravel, and I'm scared that this creative impulse is triggering some of that unraveling. And I think there's some truth in that. There's this weird two sides of the sword thing going on, that the art is both healing him and killing him. That the art is both kind of soothing him and something to occupy him, but also something that excites him and is kind of destroying him. If you're following what I mean. Is basically saying you need to recover fully before you just go down this road again. Don't take more trouble than necessary, for if you do nothing more than simply tell the story of what you see, and yeah, he's talking about art. He's saying paint what you see. You know, they say to writers, write about what you know. Tell the story of what you see, and obviously Starry Night is just that. This is what I see out my bedroom window. There will still be enough qualities in it to make your pictures last. Think of all the still lives and the flowers which Delacroix painted when he went to the country to stay with George Sand. It is true that after that he had a reversal when he did The Education of the Virgin. Does anyone want to see that? Anyone want to see that particular painting? It's not terribly wonderful. So Eugene Delacroix lived between 1798 and 1863. He lived to be 65 years, which is almost twice as old as Van Gogh. He painted The Education of the Virgin in 1852, so around about almost 40 years earlier. And so this is it. Not crazy about it. I think the thing I like the most about it is the dog. But there is something Van Gogh-y about the style, isn't there? Okay, then he says, but arrange your work in such a way that you do not overexert yourself. That's really what he's trying to get at. I told you there was like a sense of caution and a sense of measured alarm in this letter. Arrange your work in such a way that you do not overexert yourself. And Yeri says, who can tell whether you will not produce a masterpiece later if you do as I say? Well, it's just about to produce the masterpiece of masterpieces. One of the most famous masterpieces, not only of his own sort of repertoire, but in the world, one of the most famous pieces of art in the world. That's what they're talking about right when he paints it. Pretty incredible. As you know, there's an exhibition at a Café à l'Exposition where Gauguin and some others, Schuffenecker, are exhibiting pictures. At first, I'd said you would exhibit some things too, but they assumed an air of being such tremendous fellows that it made one sick. Now, this is the flip side of the coin, where you might say, you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't think Gauguin cut off Van Gogh's ear, because if he had, why are they still pals? Why, there's no animus between them. And here you are seeing that animus. You're actually seeing even Theo saying, it makes me sick the way Gauguin is acting. He really thinks he's a big deal, right? When Theo says, hey guys, my brother, is it okay if he can maybe, and then they're like, they think they're such big deals that, okay, well, I guess we're not going to have Vincent's art here, right? Are you guys seeing that? You basically have Theo saying that Gauguin is an arsehole, which he doesn't often do. He says, at first I said you, my brother, Van Gogh, would exhibit some things as well at this exhibition with you guys, right? With your friend Gauguin and with Schuffenecker. But they assumed an air of such tremendous fellows. In other words, they were so arrogant, they thought they were a lot better than you. Yet Schuffenecker claims that this manifestation will eclipse all the other painters, and if they had let him have his way, he would have paraded all over Paris, adorned with flags of all manner of colors, to show that he was the great conqueror. So something is going on with, if Van Gogh is feeling a little insecure, a little inferior, a little tail between the legs, the opposite is going on with Gauguin and Schuffenecker, especially Schuffenecker. And so you can also imagine that if this letter arrived in time, Van Gogh may have felt, jeepers, I need to put these arseholes in their place. I need to paint something I'm trying to think of the right word, truly extraordinary. It gave somewhat the impression of going to the Universal Exhibition by the back stairs. As always, there were exclusions. Lautrec, who had exhibited with a center, was not allowed to be in it, and so on. So it seems like these big shots were like, okay, you can come and you can come and you can be in it, but not you and not you and not you. The other day, a sketch by Rembrandt was sold at a public auction. I wish you could have seen it. It is the figure of the angel Gabriel standing as he is in the heaven of his etching, the Annunciation of the Shepherds. What a marvel. And so this is a picture, a painting that Theo is really putting on Van Gogh's desk and reminding him of. And let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that this particular picture had any impact on Vincent or on Starry Night? I'm talking about a picture called The Annunciation to the Shepherds, and it's basically a figure of the angel Gabriel standing in heaven. Do you think that that had any impact on Starry Night, on Vincent as well? It's brought up on June 16. June 16 is when he paints Starry Night. Think it's got any impact? Thanks, Robin. Thank you. What do you guys say? Right here in the letter, it's near the end. He talks about, I wish you could see a sketch by Rembrandt, the figure of the angel Gabriel standing in heaven, the Annunciation of the Shepherds. He says, what a marvel. The color has remained quite clear. Perhaps originally it was all yellow. He says the shadows were much more colored than was his habit and were probably a very pronounced blue, green, and violet. The general effect and the harmony are exquisite. And so he's talking about harmony in the context of the heavens. What better place to express the epicness, the most exquisite harmony that there is in the clockwork of the universe, in the harmony of the heavens, in the synchronicity of the sky and the jewels and diamonds of the sky, the night sky. Jalsi says, I believe it could have influenced him. Robbie Robbins says, yes. Right? And so let's have a look at it. It's pity we can't see it in color. But doesn't that look a bit like Starry Night in a way? What I mean is there's kind of a radiating thing, and then there's a big tree in the foreground. And I don't know if that's a village, but you kind of got this big thing going on in the sky, and there's a tree there, right? Isn't that kind of Starry Night in a way? And so maybe Van Gogh has actually got this picture in his memory. That looks like a bridge over there, right? Look at what you see over there and the radiating coming from there. And so in the context of saying Gauguin thinks he's a big deal, Schoeffer thinks he's a big deal. Wow, I actually saw a Rembrandt that blew me away. And Vincent's thinking, I want to paint something special. And how about this? This is another interpretation of the Annunciation to the Shepherds. Something's going on in the sky. There's a tree again in the foreground, right? Tree again in the foreground, a little bit of, I wouldn't say a village, but maybe a campground or something going on. And then quite a big deal going on in the sky, all sorts of things going on in the sky. That's another version from another artist, Annunciation to the Shepherds. You want to see another one? Anyone here want to see another version of the same theme? Well, here it is. And once again, tree, lots going on in the sky, and then there's like kind of a small sort of foreground with whatever's going on, and then all the action is in the sky, and it's kind of a night theme, isn't it? All of these are sort of night themes. Could this have had some impact on Van Gogh, the idea of the Annunciation? What do you guys think? Here's one more, that it's after Van Gogh's time. It's from Henry Tanner, dated 1910. How does he interpret the Annunciation? Well, there the shepherd's very small at the bottom. He has a figure. It's actually quite a beautiful painting. There's a figure kind of in the sky. It looks like an angel, and obviously the sky gets quite a lot of play here. Let's just make it a bit smaller. But what is kind of going on is there's an emphasis on the smallness of the world and the bigness of the sky. That's kind of a theme that runs throughout, right? So have you guys learned something here? Like, wow, did you know that this letter from Theo may have literally provided the impetus for Starry Night? In other words, Vincent alone, he wasn't just sitting in his room. He got a letter from Theo, which actually kind of got his heart beating. It's like, Gogh, that fucking arsehole, and cheap as all of this shit's going down, I'm going to need to step up. I need to do something right now. And then it's like, but it's the end of the day. He's gotten the letter at the end of the day, but he can't sleep. And he's like, what am I going to do? I've got to paint something freaking amazing right now. And so doesn't he have in his mind this theme, the Annunciation to the Shepherds? It's basically heaven. Think about what those words mean. The heavens talking to earth in a way. I mean, just think of what we're talking about literally. Here's the Wikipedia page. What are we talking about literally? The Annunciation to the Shepherds, it's an angel, a heavenly figure, a divine voice, a divine apparition in the sky talking to the earth. That's literally what you're talking about. Isn't that what Starry Night is? Something in the sky, something in the heavens that is being seen, being experienced by the earth. There's some kind of interaction, there's some kind of communication, there's some kind of connection, there's some kind of intercourse, for the lack of a better word, between heaven and earth in a way that's truly magical, truly kind of out of this world. And isn't that why it touches us in some way? We're like, I'm seeing something. I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing, because I'm seeing it it feels like I'm seeing it for the first time, but it feels like there's magic in the universe. I don't know if what I'm seeing means that God exists or magic exists, or that I must just have some kind of fairy tale faith in the fabric of everything, but that's what I'm feeling. And there's energy, incredible energy. Let's just deal with this briefly. As described in verses 18 to 20 of the second chapter of the Gospel of Luke, shepherds were tending their flocks out in the countryside near Bethlehem, where they were terrified by the appearance of an angel. Who else is feeling terrified by whatever? The angel explains that he has a message of good news. Who could do with some good news right now? Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He's the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. This is the message, the annunciation to the shepherds. And so it's a very important and very special and very beautiful motif. This it's not just a communication, and I love the word annunciation, to the shepherds. It's actually the beginning. It's kind of like a harbinger of something wonderful, that God is actually going to come down to earth. That God is actually making himself known, and that he's going to actually kind of be with us. That God is actually going to kind of get his hands dirty, for the lack of a better word, that God is actually going to sort things out on earth. But it's basically that God is out there, that God is up there. We are down there, and it's not that we separated anymore, that there's harmony now at last in the world and in the heavens. The world and the heavens have become one. The world and the heavens have become integrated. And we need to be saved, and God has now announced himself and he's coming, and isn't it going to be wonderful, right? And whether you want to think about it in those terms or just in very broad terms, that in the sky something benevolent, something beautiful makes itself known to the poor mortals underneath. There's something epic about it, isn't it? Right? There's something very not primal, but there's something that is extremely close to the human heart about what this is. I mean, it couldn't be a bigger statement in a way. If you wanted to paint the most epic picture, you could do worse than this, I guess is another way of putting it. Yeah, I have actually. I have, yeah. Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests. And so there's the little town of Bethlehem, but glory to God in the highest heaven. And let's not forget that Van Gogh was a pastor's son. And I'm just saying, it's this idea that is presented to him pretty much on the day that he paints Starry Night. And I can't believe that he doesn't go, wow, thanks, Theo. I'm going to take that. Theo, you've just told me what not to do. Don't overexert yourself. Theo, I'm going to jump right into this. The water is warm, right? Look at this picture. Again, the trees and the sky. The sky is the star of the show. And basically, the sky is the star in all of these shows. It's all about what is happening in the sky, right? Not so much that one. Who knew? Who knew that Theo is kind of the source material, or can be credited with probably a lot of the source material? I'm trying to remember the one Marvel movie where Pepper Potts says, I think Howard Stark says, you provided 12% of the inspiration of this, right? I don't know whether Theo provided 12% or more, whatever it is, but he certainly, I think, provided some. Quite interesting, right? And then he goes on to say, those who hold out best at the big exhibition are Corot, Manet, Delacroix, Millet, Ricard, and especially Daumier. They had hung Degas too, but he had his pictures removed. I think when he talks about big exhibition, I think he's talking about the World Fair. And you must also remember that what's happening now, we in June. Let me just make sure of this. What are the dates for the World Fair in 1889? I mean, of all the years to be basically incarcerated, this was the worst, right? This is the worst year to be kind of trapped and you can't go anywhere. It's when you have the World Fair. So the Eiffel Tower was inaugurated in March, on March 31st. So the Eiffel Tower was ready by then. But when did the World Fair actually open? I'm thinking it's maybe July or August. Oh, it actually opened already. Well, there it is. 6th of May. So by June, it's been happening for barely a month. So when I think that's also very significant is that Vincent paints Starry Night in the background to the World Fair actually happening. It's almost like I'm not there, but I'm going to participate anyway. But it's still got a ways to run until the 6th of November. And again, one of the biggest aspects of the World Fair, obviously, is the Eiffel Tower. People are going gaga about it. And again, one wonders whether there is something to that notion that towering. I mean, where have we ever seen such an enormous tree that kind of, I don't know, it's just a really, really, really tall tree that looks like a flame in any of Van Gogh's work than in Starry Night? And is it not a kind of a snipe or swipe at the Eiffel Tower? Like this is something that is beautiful, not that, not something made of steel, not that monstrosity. And I'm just saying the centerpiece of the World Fair was the Eiffel Tower. And if you hated it, wouldn't you want to say something about it? What does Robbie say? Well said. Okay. Right, we're almost at 2 hours. I'm not going to stop just yet, but we do need to wrap up. So he says, so he's talking about the artists that are doing quite well there. I don't see Monet, but he says Corot, Manet, Delacroix, Millet. He says Gauguin went off to Pont-Aven 2 weeks ago, so he's not seen your pictures. So, you kind of get the sense that Gauguin is being a real prick. Not only is he not letting Van Gogh exhibit, he's not even bothering to look at his pictures. He's doing his own thing. But Isaacson thinks very highly of your last consignment. I shall send you back the bedroom, but you must not think of retouching this canvas if you can repair the damage. Copy it and then send back this one so that I can have it recanvassed. And he's right about this. He says, the red vine is very beautiful. I've hung it in one of our rooms. I'm also very fond of the vertical portrait of a woman. I must say this is one of my favorite pictures of Van Gogh. This from web exhibits doesn't do it justice, so let's find one that does. Aren't you lucky to have someone who is presenting this who cares enough to show you the art that the way it needs to be shown? This is much better, isn't it? Just the I don't know, the harmony of color. Look how synchronized the greens of the trees that sort of go off into the horizon, and there really is an avenue of big trees there. I was there myself. I actually on my way back from Saint-Remy, I passed the spot and I quickly went there. And look at these little, how the color there, that sort of teal color, is repeated with all of these figures, and the yellow and red of the vineyard just everywhere else, in the roof and in the water and in the sky. I mean, in a way, this is an early Starry Night, just painted in a day. So in this picture, he's giving precedence to the land and the landscape and the countryside. In Starry Night, he gives it to the heavens. So he says, that's very beautiful. I've hung it in one of our 2 rooms. The red vine is going to be sold, I think, in the year that is in the asylum by a Belgian woman. And that's obviously going to be quite a vote of confidence. I'm also very fond of that vertical portrait of a woman. I'm not terribly fond of that picture. I had a visit from a certain Pollack who knows Spain and the pictures there well. He said it was as fine as one of the great Spaniards. Good health and a handshake from Joe and Theo. Okay, right. So let's go on to the letter. Oh, hang on. It's the letter before the letter. Damn. Okay, deep breath. Hope my voice is going to last. Okay. Now, if Vincent writes to Wilhelmina and he says, I just got a letter from Theo, then we know he read this before he painted the painting. Let's see what he says. My dear sister, if I didn't write to you in a hurry this Sunday morning, so that's when he's writing, this Sunday morning, while the canvases have started, are drying a little in the sun, so he's already painted a few canvases that day. Notice it's plural. I should have to wait still longer before answering your kind letter. I hope all is well with you and with Mother too. I think of you both very often. I was unable to foresee at the time when I left Newnan to go to Antwerp that the course of events would keep me away for so long and at such a distance. Perhaps this is the reason that my thoughts go back to those parts involuntarily. Maybe thinks of his father and the church as well. And then it seems to me that I'm carrying on the same work that I left unfinished there, seeing that so many things in nature are parallel. So he's got a real sense of what is left undone. It feels kind of a sense of things are incomplete. He feels a sense that things are, he feels separated. He feels that things are there, he says, at such a distance. He's feeling separated from the people of all, the people of Saint-Remy, from his brother, from his family, from just the outside of the asylum. And then he says, though it is with an obstinate ingratitude that I feel my health gradually returning. He's saying I'm not really feeling grateful. The fact is that I'm quite well, but as I told you, my inclination to take up the joys of life again can hardly be called strong. So that's quite an incredible statement to make, that he's saying, I'm not really feeling the joy of living. I'm not really feeling, he says there, obstinate ingratitude. If you'd asked yourself, when he painted Starry Night, wasn't he feeling the grace of God? Wasn't he feeling the magic of the universe as this wonderful thing? Or was he feeling kind of a sense of resentment about Gauguin and almost out of competition that he wanted to step up and kind of a sense of, in terms of his own work, I wish I could just do better, right? And I can tell you guys, the books that were the hardest for me to write were the best written books. In other words, the books that came at the greatest price, that came kind of the most dearly, read the best. And that's really strange, because you'd almost imagine that a book that just seems to write itself is so fantastic. But often the books that had to be hammered out, that sometimes you felt like I've got absolutely nothing to say, but you sit down and you hammer it out, and you suffer. I really feel that a lot of my books that cost the most, that took the most out of me, are the best books, the best, not only best written, but are the best to read. And I wrote The Murder of Vincent van Gogh immediately after writing the hardest book I think that I've ever written, and that was called Slaughter. And it was the subject matter that was so hard, but also writing it was extremely difficult, to go into these really, really dark places. And so after going into these dark places one at a time after another, I then had to go into, you might not think so, but going into Van Gogh's life is hard life, and these themes of mutilation and self-destruction, and sort of navigating through there. It's also something you need to be a bit careful of. You might go down some very, very dark paths, especially after writing the book you've just written. And so he's in a place of, in a way, I think there's a bit of bitterness. He's missing the World Fair, and all the other artists are having their time in the sun, and he's not, right? And I think part of the reason why he's writing to his sister is because it's like, I've written to my brother and I just never hear from him. If I write to her, maybe I'll hear from her. I don't know if you guys know, when I was a teenager, I had 20, 30, 40 pen pals, and the postbox was full of mail from all over the world, from Ireland, from England, from America, from Australia, from I think it was like Bosnia, but all over. And part of the reason I wrote all those letters was I felt quite lonely. I had friends, but I wanted something more. And then I would write a lot of letters to get something back. I would send things out into the world in order to get an answer. And I ended up having some correspondences that lasted 10 years. And I met some of those people. It's a little bit like the precursor to YouTube. You sort of meet people through these things you send out into the world, your books, your videos, or whatever. And so I met someone who became a doctor in Cambridge, and so that's why I think he wrote to Wilhelmina, because he's feeling lonely, right? And he just wants some kind of company, and the best that he can do is through a letter. And so he says, my inclination to take up the joys of life again can hardly be called strong. That is kind of a euphemism for I'm not feeling terribly happy. I'm not feeling terribly happy. The world is passing me by. Then he says, I've just finished a landscape representing an orchard of olive trees with grey leaves, somewhat like those of the willows in color, their violet shadows lying in the sunny sand. And another one too, which represents a field of wheat turning yellow, surrounded by blackberry bushes and green shrubs. It's quite nice. It's quite an interesting theme. Is there some symbolism in a field of wheat turning yellow? It's a field of wheat comes up green. And of course, and by the way, when I was in Orvez, right next to the graveyard, the wheat fields were quite green when I was there. But obviously, as the summer burns on, they turn yellow. Basically, the green wheat dies. And the wheat turning yellow is the wheat dying, surrounded by blackberry bushes and green shrubs. Is he feeling a bit like wheat that is turning yellow? At the end of the field, there's a little house with a tall somber cypress. Tall somber cypress. There's a tall somber cypress. And of course, he puts a gigantic cypress into Starry Night, a tree that transcends the earth and reaches out to the heavens, right? Isn't this incredibly eloquent? One thing you couldn't accuse him of is being inarticulate and clumsy and not knowing how to address this phenomenal piece of art that's about to come into the world. Almost like Jesus, this incredible piece of art is about to be born, is about to be sketched, is about to be sculpted, is about to be dreamt and then executed, right? He says, against a sky the color of forget-me-nots with pink streaks, whose pure hues form a contrast with his scorched ears, which are already heavy and have the warm tones of a bread crust. Now, again, I think we need to get the original because this just doesn't do it justice. But I do think he's a very poetic artist. You could close your eyes and maybe you want to reverse this video a little bit and listen to his description again with your eyes closed and listen to him paint what he's talking about with words. He can certainly do that. And is this it? It really does look quite beautiful. The original. Anyone want to see the original? Anyone? Okay, so close your eyes. When I say open them, then I'll show you the actual picture. And another one too, which represents a field of wheat turning yellow, surrounded by blackberry bushes and green shrubs. At the end of the field, there's a little house with a tall, somber cypress, which stands out against the far-off hills with their violet-like and bluish tones. And against the sky, the color of forget-me-nots with pink streaks, whose pure hues form a contrast with the scorched ears, which are already heavy and have the warm tones of a bread crust. Don't open your eyes. Let me put the picture on screen. Okay, you can open your eyes. And so it's a beautiful summer scene, wheat turning yellow. There's a small little house in the background. And what he's painting here is a kind of fairy tale. It's a kind of caricature of life, a happy life that is being enjoyed by nature and enjoyed by whoever stays here. And he's kind of on the outside, although he's there, he's sort of looking at it with kind of a broken heart, right? And this wheat turning yellow, you may not think it and you may not see it, but he is seeing a little bit in addition to what you are seeing. And look at that field. Look at that field on the one side, on my side. Look at the color and look at the field on the other side. It's kind of quite similar in a sense, isn't it? Just in terms of the boundary of the field with grasses and trees and whatnot. I mean, in broad strokes. So it's kind of an echo of it. Okay. I have still another one on which a wheat field on the slope of the hills is all devastated and smashed to earth by the pouring rain and the rushing water of a cloudburst. That's the one we saw earlier. Of course, this is not the best version of it. But that obviously made an impression on him, that there was a big storm and he went out and he looked at what this storm had done to the wheat field. It's again the destruction of the wheat field. It's again the grass that is, instead of being green and now it's yellow, it's now devastated and smashed to earth. Isn't he seeing it in the landscape himself? And if you think about it, isn't he in a way drawing companionship out of the actual nature that surrounds him? Is actually drawing a sense of comfort and solidarity, and I don't know, say validation, but kind of a sense of companionship, that he sees his same plight in nature and nature's plight in himself. And there's a kind of harmony going on there as well, right? Between nature and man, and certainly this man, between this man and all his problems and all the pain that he's feeling, and the beauty in nature is feeling the kind of circle of life. And then he says, it seems to me that the people of this country work a good deal less than the peasants at home, right? And I know when I was in America, some of the people that I met there said, "Cheapers, you work a lot. If you lived in America, you'd be a multimillionaire the way you work." I don't think it's quite the same. I think in the south of France, because of the heat, but also because of the culture, he's just observing that the Dutch are have a tremendous work ethic. And that's part of the reason he doesn't go to the asylum and just put down his brushes and become a vegetable and just rot. He takes that Protestant work ethic into the asylum. And that also makes him different to the madmen around him, is he's not French. He's not from there. And not only that, he is an artist, and a particularly intense artist at that. He says, one hardly sees any cattle. It's the same thing he said to Thea. And the fields make a much more deserted impression than those of our country. And so he realizes there's something different about this landscape. This isn't just a landscape interchangeable with any other landscape. There's a different energy here. He says, in my opinion, this is very deplorable. All the more so as nature is the reverse of stingy. The air is so pure and healthy. And so he is kind of getting the sense that, can't you see it? It's like, people around me, can't you see it? It's frustrating me. I feel the energy in this landscape. And of course, he's from a place that is often sunless, and even in summer, cold and wet and damp. I was in The Hague and Amsterdam and other parts of the Netherlands in late May, and it was pretty, for me, chilly. You could barely walk around with a t-shirt in late May. And so he says, so what one should like to see is a more energetic race of men. And that's, again, what he's thinking. And think about Starry Night as this energy racing through the heavens. And it's almost like he wants the sky, this energetic sky, the sparkling, sizzling sky, to reach the sleepy village below and just wake it up. Wake up! Almost like the Annunciation in terms of Bethlehem. Wake up, a child is born. There's a God is coming to the earth in a stable. Do you know that? He says the cases where nothing becomes doing wrong, the cases where doing nothing becomes doing wrong, do not seem to be exceptional here. Aren't there heaps of honest workers without enough bread in the north, because people there work so much that work is no longer held in high regard? People there work so much that work is no longer held in high regard. And can you imagine how he feels? He's working his arly off. He's working like crazy, getting nowhere, and he's surrounded by kind of layabouts and lazy folk, and they sneer at him. That's kind of horribly ironic, isn't it? It's a bit of a cruel joke that life has pulled on him, that these sort of lazy layabouts have a fairly good life, and he's there working his butt off, and he's having a really tough life, and now he's in an asylum to boot. Rookie says with an exclamation mark, that was a beautiful painting. I don't know why someone wouldn't have loved to buy it. I think if they saw the words, that may have changed their hearts, right? Very much so. You have no idea how can I put it? Starry Night up close has large pieces of it where you can actually see the canvas underneath. I've showed that to you guys before, but when you look with your face like barely a hand's width from Starry Night, and you look at the detail, you cannot believe how much of the canvas fabric. I mean, you see the color of the canvas poking through the paint all over the place. And so when you say he must have been low on paint, it's either that he was low on paint or he's painting so furiously fast that he just didn't get to fill up the whole canvas. Not just over here and over there. You can't actually believe how much of that canvas doesn't actually have paint on it. It's actually unreal. I'll try and dig out the pictures that I did take of it. But I'm sure some of you can remember that. Is there anyone here that can remember when I showed it to you? Liesel says that's why I live in the north. Okay. I think that may have had an impact. I mean, it's definitely a type of stimulation that he is both needing to get away from, but is also, yeah. I mean, it's forcing him to. It's forcing him to conduct a kind of escapism, and obviously he's doing the best kind of escapism he knows, art, right? Chelsea says, I do remember. Jody says, I remember it. Robbie Robbins says also. Yeah, I mean, it's actually unreal. I was shocked when I saw it. I was like, well, there's a piece here. And then I was like, here, and all over. It's like, wow, it's weird when you see Starry Night, you don't actually realize there's no paint over there or whatever. It's actually pretty crazy. So then he says, I don't mean to say that this is always the case, but surely there's something of the kind. While the farms here would produce 3 times as much, they're basically saying if Dutch farmers worked until these fields, they would be 3 times as productive as they do now if they were well kept, and the whole land too, if they were sufficiently manured. And if the country here should produce 3 times as much, it might feed a lot more people. Now, I think you asked me whether always supposing that love is a bacillus, meaning a bacteria, which I'm unable to affirm or to prove, a fact I request you please not to lose sight of. I think you asked me whether there are persons who have said bacillus and others who do not. Remember, that's what the doctor said. Or whether, on the contrary, it is fatal and a universal malady. There again, I'm pretty incompetent to form a well-rounded, clear opinion. But in my estimation, it is probable that if somebody, let's say you for the sake of argument, were convinced he did not have it, it would perhaps be sensible of such a person to inoculate herself or himself with the aforesaid bacillus, according to the method of Pasteur. So yeah, you really are dealing with a well-read, and I mean, he is kind of joking, but a well-read Van Gogh who is keying into the latest medical technology, the latest news, for the lack of the better word, of Pasteur. When did Louis Pasteur do his thing? When did he walk the earth? Anyone know? He was a microbiologist. He developed vaccines. Um, he did his thing in the 19th century. Otherwise, Van Gogh wouldn't ever have heard of him. But he lived until 1895. So he was still alive now during this time, but he would only be alive for another 6 years. So this guy. So he's very much a contemporary, very much contemporaneous to the time that Van Gogh is talking about. Just as I tried to say a moment ago, the thinking about space and the universe had actually been kind of developed at this time as well. Remember, telescopes and photography and newspapers were like coming into vogue in a much bigger way than they ever had, right? Also engineering, engineering of the Eiffel Tower, engineering of machines and engines and gadgets, including things like telescopes that had and printing presses. Not saying the printing press had been invented then, but it was probably becoming a lot more mainstream. So for the first time, you were having things like comics and magazines and newspapers and paperbacks, right? Then he says, joking apart, I'm of the opinion that a man or a woman ought to be desperately in love with something or somebody, and the only precaution one might be able to take is to do it a certain way according to one's ideas and not in any other way. In a weird way, he's kind of saying the same thing that Theo said, which is, don't just jump in. You need to do it in a certain way. When you love something or someone, do it in a certain way and not in another way. As to knowing one's own mind, and in matters of this kind, alas, we know ourselves so little. Isn't that a wise thing to say? All of us know ourselves so little. As a matter of fact, I am inclined to believe that women are apt to take the offensive in these things, that those among them who are wise, or rather who have the truest and surest instincts. Does this sound like a crazy person? Does this sound like a person who can't concentrate or isn't sensible? He says they do not wait for somebody else to love them before they fall in love themselves, which, and I am disposed to think there are good reasons for this, seems to them to be the essential thing. And finally, it is more than probable that even after having inoculated oneself with the attenuated bacillus of the right virus. So he's speaking in kind of a symbolic way. He's saying it's almost like vaccinate yourself against pessimism, vaccinate yourself against cynicism, vaccinate yourself against shallow people, vaccinate yourself against whatever the doubt is. He says, well chosen and of the correct dosage, and thus having become all the more secure against contagion, at least if one is not, and even vaccinate yourself against your own doubts, your own self-destructive impulses. At least if one has not caught the malady yet, that does not definitely prevent one from catching it. Whereas if one already has it, one cannot catch it again. I think that is something that he says. I'm not sure if he says it in the asylum. I do know that he said it in the past. That he's kind of said, if you're already mad, if you can't sell your art, well, you've already failed. You can't fail again. You've already endured that nightmare. I know I was in a relationship with someone. When I came out of it, I thought nothing could be worse than this, and that was quite a liberating thought. Then he says, I'm sort of longing for news from Theo. And so it seems like he still hasn't got that letter from Theo, the one about the Annunciation, at the time that he writes this letter, and it's Sunday morning, who seems to be rather absorbed in his honeymoon, which is a very good thing. Last week, he sent me a consignment of paints and canvases, but a month has gone by since I received a letter from him. Well, I was hoping to end this at 2 hours. It's already 2.5 hours. Well, there's one more letter to go, almost there. It is a great consolation to me to know that he is no longer living alone. I think this is the third person he's said this to. He said it to Joe, he said it to Theo, and now to Wilhelmine. And then he says, his wife wrote me a very good letter some time ago, which proved to me that she is a very serious young woman. Can you imagine if Theo married a tart or a tramp or a, trying to think of another word that starts with a T, trash. I'm just saying it's quite interesting that Vincent describes her as a serious young woman as opposed to a superficial, shallow person. Had Theo married a tart for a trollop, there we go. Had Theo married a trollop, we may never have gotten to know Van Gogh. I mean, maybe his work would have ended up in a shack somewhere, for all we know. I think Dr. Gachet had a big part to play as well, but certainly Joe, with the letters, had a massive, massive part to play. I don't know if you guys know, Liesel and I met up in Boulder, and we had a really good conversation. We were kind of thinking about just how asleep and unself-aware so much of the world is. But from the context of talking about the law, and Liesel's qualified and studied the law, and I've studied the law. It's just so weird, and we spoke about certain cases. It's quite disheartening to know how people just don't understand the law, especially in the true crime space. It's horrifying, actually. And people think that they are experts because they're following some YouTuber. And anyway, and so she is a very serious young woman. She will need this quality now and for a long time to come. For Theo's life is rather complicated because of his duty toward Bouchard and Valadon and co. Well, that's also a pretty portentous comment because Theo's life is about to end and Joe's life is about to become very complicated. The death, which is not that far away now, it's barely a year away, of Vincent himself is about to seriously complicate Theo's life as well, and her life. And she's going to be a mother with with a child who they're going to name after Vincent, which shows you how much they thought of him, that they named their child after him. I mean, this is not just empty sentiment. Anyway, he says, as for her, she will learn to prefer life with him to life without him, without being obliged to change too much or to forget all the things she already knew in Holland. Now I'm going out to work a little, so I wish you all prosperity and health. You and mother too, with a kiss in thought. So after he writes this letter, and he's thinking about Holland, he's thinking about his brother, he's thinking about viruses and being inoculated. That's how he ends off that letter. And now this is on the day, basically, that he paints Starry Night. Did you know that? So here we are. Vincent to Theo, 17 or 18 June. Well, now we know for sure it's the day after he gets Theo's letter. So this is what he says. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready for the Starry Night letter? This is the Starry Night letter. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready? This is the Starry Night letter. We've been building up to this for almost 25 episodes, right? We've been coming to here basically from the time of the ear incident. It's like the ear incident was like the end of one era. You know, there was the whole triumph of Gogh coming and the artists doing their thing, and then the ear incident, and then this long downward spiral. And this is sort of the incredible triumph that he dredges out of this drudgery and adversity. It's pretty incredible. It's incredible that he's been in the asylum about a month with mad people, and he comes up with this clear-eyed, this crystal clear vision of the world. Isn't it really incredible? And as Liesl says, he was only 36 years old. Now, I think we need to deal with the Starry Night letter with Timmy. Timmy needs to be part of this. Timmy, come. Hey, come. Timmy. Hey, come. Come, boy. Come, boy, come. Stretch. Stretch. Okay, jump. Come. Come, boy. He always wants me to pick him up. I prefer it if he jumps. Stop snoring. Jump. Come. Come, boy. Come. Hop. 1, 2, 3, hop. Come. Put in some effort. I think he's very mollycoddled. Okay. Timmy, are you ready for Starry Night? Timmy, look at the stars. Timmy, are you ready for Starry Night? I think he's like, just go to freaking sleep. Okay. Are you guys ready for Starry Night? Let's go. My dear Theo, thank you for yesterday's letter. I too cannot write as I would like. It's like he's almost already saying, I can't express what's kind of going on. But after all, we live in such a disturbed time. Look at those words, disturbed time. The sky is disturbed above the sky, above the town, that there can be no way of having opinions fixed enough to form any judgment of things. He's kind of saying, don't have like an inflexible idea of things. Have a flowing sense, have a kind of a, what's the word? Like almost an elastic approach to reality. Then he says, I should have liked very much to know if you are still having your meals in a restaurant or whether you're living more at home. I hope so, for in the long run, that must be best. And so I think what he's really asking there is, Joe a good cook? It's kind of a diplomatic way of saying, are you eating at home? Is Joe cooking for you at home? What's going on? And so those are the sort of customary paragraphs before he talks about himself. It's sort of like, let's talk about you, Theo. Let's talk in general terms. Okay, with that out the way, now I'm going to talk about me, right? Thanks a lot, Liesl. Here we go. Things are going well with me. You will understand that after almost half a year now of absolute frugality in eating, drinking, smoking, with 2-hour baths twice a week of late, it's evident it should steady me a lot. So there he's saying, wow, I've achieved a bit of stability. Look at what he can produce when he just doesn't have chaos and shitters around him. We can just kind of give him a little bit of an opportunity just to do his thing. When he just has a stable environment for a little bit of time, right? He says, it's all going well. And as for the work, far from wearing me out, it occupies and distracts me, which I'm in great need of. And so this is really a reference to Starry Night. He's saying that it occupies and distracts me. It's a kind of escapism, right? And he's saying, I'm in need of being occupied because there's nothing else to do here, and distraction because what is here is pretty horrible. I'm glad to hear that Isaacson has found some things that please him in my consignment. He and DeHaan seem very faithful. This is obviously a response to Theo's letter. You know, he has absorbed what Theo wrote. This is his response. He's also encouraged. He and DeHaan seem very faithful, and that is so rare nowadays. I wonder what he's going to say about Gogh here. And that is so rare nowadays that one must appreciate it. And I'm also glad to hear that someone else has turned up who actually saw someone in the saw something in the woman's figure in black and yellow. Well, sorry, I'm not one of them. That does not surprise me, though I think that the merit is in the model and not in the painting. well, quite a humble position to take on that. I despair of ever finding models. Remember him going through that period. If now and then I'd someone like that, or like the woman who posed for La Bercuse, I could do something very different yet. Now he talks about Gauguin. I think you were right not to show any pictures of mine at the exhibition that Gauguin and the others had. Mine not yet being recovered is reason enough for my keeping out of it without giving them offense. I think that unquestionably Gauguin and Bernard have great and real merit. Well, so he seems to not hold anything against them. And it remains very understandable that for beings like them, young and very vigorous, who must live and try to hack out their way, it would be impossible to turn all their canvas to the wall until it should please people to admit them into something, into the official stew. So in a way, they are up against the same thing Van Gogh is, kind of the cliffs that the waves of effort are breaking against, right? You spoke about that previously. He says, you cause a stir by exhibiting in cafes. I do not say it is not bad taste to do it, but I myself have this crime on my conscience twice over, as I exhibited at the Tambourine and at the Avenue de Clichy, without counting the upset caused to 81 worthy anthropophagi of the good town of Arles and the excellent mayor. So there's being very facetious, being quite facetious there. Do you really think he thinks the mayor of Arles is excellent? So in any case, I'm worse and more to blame than they, as far as that goes, in causing stir enough, my word, quite involuntarily. Young Bernard, I think, has already done some absolutely astonishing canvases in which there's a sweetness and something essentially French and sincere of rare quality. Look at what he's talking about. Absolutely astonishing canvases. There's a sweetness and something essentially French and sincere and of rare quality. That's what he wants to do. Then he says, after all, neither he nor Gauguin are artists who could ever look as if they were trying to get into a universal exhibition by the back stairs. Quite a compliment to them. Be reassured about this, that they could not hold their tongues is very understandable. That the Impressionist movement has no unity proves that they aren't as skilled fighters as other artists such as Delacroix and Courbet. At last, and so here it is, at last I have a landscape with olive trees. That's a new one, right? And this is apparently a precursor to Starry Night. By the way, the alpeels in the background are the alpeels that I mountain biked over. Let's just see if we can get a better version of that particular picture. Just a second, sorry. I think it's this one. I just think it's worth, because it's the penultimate picture, it's worth showing the proper one. So you can see that he's kind of gravitated to a style. Let's take myself away. A style of having a sort of frothing sky and even a frothing foreground, right? There's a lot of emotion in his pictures at the moment. Compare the kind of what's the word? The frothiness of this picture to the landscape he did of the wheat field of all, the farm scene, which is far more tethered in reality. This is already becoming quite fluid in terms of emotions and in terms of turning reality into something almost moving and electrified, right? It's also kind of dark. It almost looks like this is at night. Anyway, and then he says, I did the landscape with olive trees and also a new study of a starry sky. That's it. I did a new study of a starry sky. By the way, these, you can kind of see it here. These lines here are all, these sort of funny lines here, that's all where the paint isn't covering the canvas. It's all over. These sort of lines that are kind of a brown color in the sky, actually where the paint is actually not covering the canvas. It almost looks like he's using brown or tan tones, but it's actually the color of the canvas underneath. And so that's what he calls it, a starry sky. Though I have not seen either Gauguin's or Bernard's last canvases, look at what he says here. I am pretty well convinced that these two studies are parallel in feeling. In other words, he's saying, I think these studies are as good as theirs. That's a rare bit of, what's the word? Self-complimenting. What's another word for self-complimenting? Vanity. What's another word for complimenting oneself? I don't know if I would say confidence. I don't know if vanity is really the word that I would use. What do you guys say? Conceit, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. It's almost like validation, right? He's validating himself. And I think he did validate himself. Don't you agree? When you have looked at these two studies for some time, and that of the ivy as well, and so here he's saying, if you spend some time looking at these pictures, and obviously Starry Night as well, it will give perhaps you some idea, better than words could, of the things that Gauguin and Bernard and I sometimes used to talk about. So he's actually dealing with the intangible. He's dealing with quite esoteric subjects like the universe and space and other things, right? And then he says, which we've thought about a good deal. It is not a return to the romantic or to religious ideas, right? So he's saying, I'm not painting the Annunciation of the shepherds. I'm painting my own an original, I don't even want to say version of that, almost an iteration of that. If the Annunciation of the shepherds is an idea, this is an extension on that idea. It's not just another version of that idea. It's taking that idea further and deeper. I mean, he's not painting any angels. He's not painting God even. He's painting something else. Then he says, nevertheless, by going the way of Delacroix, more than is apparent by color and a more spontaneous drawing than delusive precision, one could express the purer nature of the countryside compared with the suburbs and cabarets of Paris. Now, Massa, I kind of get gooseflesh reading that, because it really does seem like he's comparing where he is to Paris, and he's comparing Paris unfavorably to Starry Night and to the countryside that he's next to, right? So I don't think, I can't remember who the critic was who said that he was imagining the tall cypress as the Eiffel Tower, as a mockery of the Eiffel Tower, as a comparison to the Eiffel Tower. I think that's valid, because here he says it. One could express the purer nature of a countryside compared with the suburbs and the cabarets of Paris. And isn't that what he did? He was showing the countryside in all of its sparkling brilliance and majesty, somewhere out in the world where you would love to be. And it looks quaint, it looks cared for, it looks like people live happily ever after there. Is that true of Paris? I mean, Paris has got its moments, but it's also a series of traffic jams and, you know, smoke and noise, right? I love Paris, but it certainly is hard to get around and sort of choked up in a way with crowds. He says one would try to paint human beings who are also more serene and pure than Daumier had before his eyes, but following Daumier, of course, in the drawing. Whether it exists or not is something we may leave aside, but we do believe that nature extends beyond St. Ouen. So he seems to be drawing the preeminence of nature, basically trying to, in a way, you could say it's regression, that in the face of industrialization, in the face of engineering, in the face of machines, he is kind of pining for the purity of the countryside. And in a way, Gauguin does exactly the same thing. You might say that's a little regressive, which I tend to think it is. There's nothing wrong with the beauty of the countryside, but there's also nothing wrong with progress in terms of medicine, which he's in dire need of. I mean, he could have really done with that earlier. In terms of machines that transport us, can you imagine if he could have just caught a plane to Paris, or Theo could have caught a plane to Arles, you know, just a quick hour and then go back in the afternoon. Then he says, but perhaps while reading Zola, we are moved by the sound of the pure French of Renan, for instance. After all, this is not a very long letter, while the Chat Noir draws us women after its fashion in the forain, in a fashion that's masterly, we do some of our own, and being less Parisian, but no less fond of Paris and its graces, we try to prove that something very different exists as well. Isn't that a amazing summary for this picture? Isn't that an amazing summary for this picture? We try to prove that something very different exists as well. And what does he mean? Well, people exist on this earth that are very different to other people. There are very creative people in the world. There are very original people in the world. There are people who work a lot harder than some people in the world. There are people that see the world in a way that perhaps more people need to see the world. There are people that experience the world that people perhaps need to experience more. There are people that love and respect nature in a way that perhaps nature deserves, and nature's not getting what it deserves. Isn't this proof of exactly what he's saying, that it is possible to see things very, very differently? And because he succeeds in that, this becomes an absolute blockbuster. It becomes one of the most recognized artworks in the world, because this artist sat down and in the midst of everything he was going through, he tried to show that something very different exists, something worthwhile is out there. And it just takes seeing it. It just takes a change of perspective. It just takes the ability to connect to what is already there. It's there. It's just something that you need to be able to kind of change your reference points to, so that you can absorb what is all around you. The magic, the electricity, the energy of your surroundings. And what has he been talking about all the time? Just how lazy the people are, and the energy of his surroundings. And here he's drawing the world the way he wishes it was, energized, vitalized, right? And then he goes on to say, where was I? Gogh, Bernard, and I may stop at that point perhaps and not conquer, but neither shall we be conquered. That's also pretty fighting talk. Bernard never really amounted to much of an artist, but Gauguin certainly did. Perhaps we exist neither for the one thing nor for the other. And this is such a, I don't know, it almost makes me cry reading it. Perhaps we exist. We just copy it like that. Quite a profound statement. And he's talking about himself and another artist and another artist. He's not talking about everybody. He's saying perhaps some of us exist, perhaps Gauguin, Bernard, and I, perhaps some artists exist to give consolation. What a statement. What a statement. Perhaps we exist to give consolation. I must tell you, when I was actively doing my photojournalism, I was writing for a magazine called Country Life, and I was doing a series on artists. And one of the artists I chose to do was a guy called drawing a blank now. Is a Belgian artist. They called him the painting priest. Can't believe I can't think of his name. I must be really tired. Clairaut is one of those artists that is known really by one name, Clairaut, like Rembrandt, Van Gogh. You could even say Vincent, but I guess Clairaut. I know it seems like I'm going down a tangent, but this is quite an important one. So this guy is from Belgium, and he came to live in South Africa, and is actually from West Flanders. And if you want to read about him, here is his thing. He's a Catholic pastor. And anyway, so I came to, well, they didn't actually show any of his art. That's pathetic. I don't know if you could, so these are some of his paintings. And he would actually paint biblical themes like mother and child, but it would be African woman, bare-chested African woman. He would paint donkeys. And his art later on looked kind of different, right? We have a couple of Clairauts at home, like in my dad's house. The originals, not with acrylics. The originals, I think he got cancer or something because he was painting with oils, and so he had to change to acrylics. But you can see it's got a bit of a Van Gogh vibe about it, doesn't it? He was also very into sunflowers and the sun. And I think the title of the article was something like "Chaser of the Free State Sun." That was what I called it. All these pictures you're seeing here aren't his best. Just trying to see if there's a good one here. What's very different between Clairaut and Van Gogh is Clairaut's pictures have got people at the sort of center of them. They're very, there's a love of people in his pictures. Um, they are people centric, whereas Van Gogh's are definitely not. People are small and kind of in the background. Anyway, I think I've kind of introduced him kind of enough. But the thing I wanted to share with you guys is when I when I um when I went to the area in person where he lived, where he sculpted, and his sculptures are still there, and where he painted, I kind of went to like a studio, and I met a woman that had been his friend, that had kept. She was kind of a Joe Van Gogh figure. She was someone who had been his friend and had kept his pictures and had a lot of stories to tell about him. And when I interviewed her, she, you can interview someone and they can just, in a very light way, tell you their story. They're only going to tell you a certain thing if they decide that they trust you, if they decide that you're listening, if they decide that you the kind of person that in your hands it's going to become something, and perhaps if they like you. And I remember her saying, I don't know why, it just is something that stayed with me ever since. She was saying how he described, to use an Afrikaans word, disaligheid, which means consolation. I don't know, it almost makes me want to cry. That he would be out in a field at night and look up at the heavens. And he's far from home. He's a Belgian artist, also kind of quite misunderstood, ministering to the Africans somewhere in the Free State, a small little town. And he would feel kind of the presence of God in the rustling of the grass. And some people think the Free State is incredibly ugly and is just yellows and browns. And he saw Madonna and Child, and he saw Jesus coming into Jerusalem on the donkey in the people that were around him. He saw the love of God in the sunflower and in the sun. And what just spoke to me was when she said, using this word, you don't hear it very often in Afrikaans, that he was trying to express disaligheid, which means the consolation that you feel out here in Africa in nature, and try and convey that in his art, convey that feeling of peace and grace and love and beauty, which sort of comes through nature or comes through God or whatever the way you see that kind of thing. I just thought it was so incredibly beautiful. And this is exactly what Van Gogh is also talking about. That my job, like his father was a pastor, my job is to do a similar thing, but not with religion. My job is to give consolation. And think about how generous a thing it is that he's doing. He's someone that is suffering incredibly. He's someone that is so lonely. He's someone that is so beaten down and rejected and cast out and ridiculed. And yet, despite all of that, he can say, what I want to do is give. I want to give. I want to console you. I don't need consolation. I'm here to console you. And I mean, isn't that exactly what Starry Night does? There's something in it that is restorative, encouraging, I don't want to say harmonizing, but it kind of makes you feel that the world is a good place, that there is magic in the moonlight, that the universe is good. I can't really put it in a different way. Safe, right, pure, that everything is okay in a way. It's extraordinary. And that, remember I said when I was a little boy, I wanted to paint, but I felt like I don't know how I can say what I feel through a tree or a house or a road. I've got a better idea now, but at the time I felt I just don't know how I could say something so sophisticated and detailed through things like color and a shape, right? And that is what makes Starry Night actually so magnificent and so incredible, is that if you were sitting down, you and you and you, and somebody said, I want you to paint consolation. Here it is. I'll write it down on a piece of paper. Paint this, draw this. What do you think you would come up with? Would you know what to come up with? Would you be able to come up with anything close to what you were feeling in drawing lines and putting smears of paint on a canvas? And that is what is so underestimated about this tremendous artist and this tremendous man, was that he was able to express that. He succeeded. And the world was changed. The world is changed. He tapped into everything that he knew about color and shapes and textures and contrasts and God and religion and his knowledge of art and artists and what Theo was telling him and what he was going through. And he took all of it and he put it together and he thought about it. He didn't just randomly go out and draw a olive tree. He looked out of his window and it all came to life, and that's what he expressed. The consolation in a way that I think he wanted to feel. He gave it as a gift to the world, to us, for us to feel. Because make no mistake, he wanted and needed consolation. And instead he gives it to us. We who can't express it, he could express it. And why could he express it? Because he was going through such a terrible time. And that's what he knew he needed. But he also, I guess, knew this is what the world needs as well. Right? Okay, let's finalize this letter. We're almost through. And then he says, perhaps Isaacson and Dahan will not succeed either, but in Holland, they felt the compulsion to maintain that Rembrandt did great painting and not delusive photography. That's also what's going on in the background. You know, a photo, can a photo convey deep and rich sentiments? Sometimes, but more often than not, no. They also felt something that was different. And that's, again, a repetition of what it said earlier. We try to prove that something very different exists in the world. We try to give greater consolation. We feel something that's different. We feel something that's different. In the true crime space, I'm exactly the same. I feel, and many of you as well, I feel something that's different. I don't want to be telling the stories that everyone else is telling. I feel something that's different. I want to tell a story that's different. And I don't appreciate being mocked when I'm doing it, because it's actually, in a way, I know it sounds arrogant, It's a gift you're giving to the world. It's an interpretation of reality that can help the world. Meanwhile, you're being kicked in the face over and over again. Other creators out there are looking at you and laughing and being scornful and taking sadistic pleasure in your difficulty, right? Then he, at the end of all that, he says, I have no more white at all, at all. And that is certainly clear from Starry Night. He had run out of white. And so we almost didn't get Starry Night. He almost didn't finish it off because he used up, and look at where there's trying to put white into there, right? Where's the most white in Starry Night? And look at where all these little pieces where the canvas is actually shining through. He wants to put white there. So in a very strange way, Starry Night is also not what he intended. Something else happened when he was trying to make Starry Night. There's that saying, life happens when we're making other plans. I'm also not even showing you the proper version of Starry Night. This is the web exhibits version. I think when we do the next live, we'll do that one. I'll show you that one, and I'll show you the photos that I took of Starry Night in the gallery. But there you have it. It's quite funny. I have no more white at all. He's used it all up. You would give me great pleasure by writing again soon. I so often think that after some time, your marriage, I hope, will give you back your old vigor, and that a year from now, you will be in better health. Theo's also, make no mistake, Theo also has syphilis. He just doesn't know it. Theo's also not in terribly good nick. What I should very much like to have read here, and I don't know if you know this, Theo would also end up in an asylum and would also die. Well, not also, he would die in an asylum. That's Theo's fate waiting for him. Life can be a cruel SOB. What I should very much like to have read here now and then would be Shakespeare. Think about that. All the people who think Van Gogh is mad, the mad artist. The mad artist wants to read Shakespeare. How many mad people do you know say they want to read Shakespeare? There is one at a shilling, Dick's shilling Shakespeare, which is complete. There are plenty of editions, and I think the cheap ones have been altered less than more expensive ones. Remember I was saying he's living in a time where technology is creating different things, like he's able to consume, for example, Japanese prints, is able to, 3 hours 12, is able to read paperbacks and I mean, he's a big book hound, isn't he? Magazines and newspapers and all that, thanks to the technology that is really making it kind of mainstream. Pulp paperbacks, comics, things that are almost like comics. He says there are plenty of editions, and I think the cheap ones have been altered less than the more expensive ones. Hey, stop snoring. In any case, I don't want one that costs more than 3 francs. Then he says, meanwhile, whatever is too bad in this batch, put it aside altogether. No use having stuff like that about. Now can you believe that? Hey, wake up. Timmy's having a bad dream. Can you believe it? You have an artist whose work is worth like $100 million. His work is exhibited in the most expensive galleries and the most prestigious galleries in the world. And in the same letter, I mean, this is humility. If you were saying earlier that is conceited, that is vain, that is arrogant, is saying, you know what, if there's some bad art in this batch, just kind of throw it away. This is a guy whose art's going to be worth like $100 million. Just if you don't like that, just throw it away. It's fine. He definitely isn't struggling with feelings of humility. And then he says, it may be useful later on to remind me of things. Whatever is good in it will show up better in a smaller number of canvases. The rest are only worth, and think about the humble place. Think about Jesus is born in a stable, in a barn, not a hotel or a castle, is born in a stable. This picture arises in an asylum a month after he's moved in there. He lives in this Spartan room. The food he eats is musty. His neighbors are lunatics. This picture that speaks to the human condition, speaks of the consolation the human condition needs, arises in such a humble place, but also such a humble person. Someone who's worked so hard and then produces this. And then he says the rest are only worth putting flat in some corner between two sheets of cardboard with some old newspapers between the studies. I mean, this is almost a joke. He's just produced Starry Night, this incredible painting, and then he's saying, oh, my other stuff, just put it between some newspapers. Forget about it. Put some cardboard over it. Then he says, I'm sending you a roll of drawing. Handshakes for you, Joe, and our friends. Ever yours, Vincent. Now, one thing we really do want to know is, what is Theo's reaction going to be to Starry Night? Is Theo going to recognize it as something special? Is anyone going to recognize it as something special? Or, and I mean, this is incredible to contemplate, is someone going to look at Starry Night and go, huh, keep going, keep trying. Okay, so you did that, okay. Don't give up your day job. And so then he says the drawings, Hospital at Arles, that's this one. Quite a good picture, right? Hospital at Arles and Weeping Tree in the Grass. I'm not terribly fond of that one. The Fields and the Olives. Paints a lot of trees, doesn't he? Or a continuation of those old ones of Montmayor. By the way, when I cycled to, there's the bike behind me. When I cycled to Saint-Remy, I went to Montmayor on the way. And that's another thing that he also painted quite often. Anyway, he says, the others are hasty studies made in the garden. There's no hurry for the Shakespeare. If they haven't got an edition like that, it doesn't take an eternity to order it. Do not fear. And this, now he's addressing at the end of this pretty epic letter. I mean, if you know Starry Night and you know what Starry Night became, pretty epic. This is a pretty epic letter. At the end of this epic letter, in the postscript, he deals with Theo's admonition to kind of tread carefully in terms of your art. Like Theo's just said to him, bro, cool it a bit with the art. The art might actually be not helpful to your state of mind. And then that's when he produces Starry Night, right? Anyway, and then he says, do not fear that I shall ever of my own will rush to dizzy heights. He's just done it. It's like he's saying, Theo, please don't be worried that I'll rush to dizzy heights. Sorry, it's too late. You've just done it. You've just rushed to the dizziest of heights with Starry Night, in a manner of speaking. It's hilarious. Theo, don't worry, I'm not going to rush to dizzy heights. Hello, sorry, Vincent, sorry, it's too late. The deed is done. You have created something that will break records, smash conventions, change minds, change the world. Change hearts and minds. It was something that was very much part of Gabby Petito's journey. She kind of took Van Gogh with her. One of the pictures I think she bought from Zion was a Van Gogh-inspired Starry Night above Zion. It's one of the things that's in there. It touched a lot of people, gave consolation. Gabby was struggling with anxiety, gave consolation to a lot of people. Don't worry, I'm not going to go to dizzy heights. Sorry, your art is going to go around the world. It's going to going to affect humanity. It's going to affect our species for the better. And then he says, unfortunately, we are subject to the circumstances and the melodies of our time. And that is what is so, and this is me just wrapping up, that is what is the most remarkable thing about all of this, is that despite such circumstances that he was under, he was having literally fainting spells, he was losing consciousness, he was having attacks, panic attacks, nightmares, people thought he had epilepsy. He was thrown out of his home and he's in some other area and he still finds his feet. In other words, what are we talking about? What are we talking about in terms of when he paints Starry Night? We're talking about transcendence. We're talking about a man who's able to transcend his circumstances, a man who, though he's treated abysmally by the people around him, though nobody has any faith in him, and I don't know, he's nevertheless able to develop the self-belief and the self-esteem and the wherewithal to produce something as seminal as this. It's almost like water off a duck's back, right? It's incredible. And so what he's able to do is he transcends all that through the creative impulse, through creativity, that he transcends all of this destruction that's going on around him. People are breaking him down. A disease is eating him up from the inside. He's being literally locked out of a great exhibition, a world fair in Paris. Despite all of that despair, disappointment, bitterness that he should feel, he produces something that transcends all of it. That is what is really incredible about this. And it shows that we can do the same thing, that we can produce magic and work and efforts that are not equal to the circumstances that we are in, that transcend them. And Chelsea was saying, I posted a link to on X to someone that I really respect. She's probably the Vincent van Gogh of Ironman triathlon. I know that sounds like very weird, but Lucy Charles Barkley is someone who has also suffered, has also gone through a lot of difficulty and transcended it. Somebody described her as the most resilient person I've ever met. Van Gogh is the same way. Painting a painting like this, when nobody gives you the benefit of the doubt, when nobody validates you except really one person, your brother, maybe one or two other people, that kind of resilience leads to transcendence. So in Lucy Charles Barkley's case, some of you know about this. She started the marathon in the Ironman triathlon with a torn calf, and she just ignored it. And she set the she won the race and set the fastest ever women's Ironman record, even with a torn calf. She just didn't let that stop her. She transcended her circumstances because of her resilience, but also because of her toughness. And Chelsea, you can, yeah, and that's absolutely part of it. But by getting into these ice cold baths and training, that's how you develop resilience. That's how Van Gogh developed his resilience, by going to the Borinage, by by having the work ethic and serving the work ethic the way that he did. Transcendence is it's not just a snap and you've got it. It's something that comes from work and effort and other things. And that is what makes Starry Night such an incredible thing. It's transcendent. It looks transcendent, and it also is transcendent. And so he says, finally, with the number of precautions I'm now taking, I'm not likely to relapse, and I hope that the attacks will not begin again. And of course, he's not going to get the happily ever after. The attacks are going to worsen. And thank goodness he painted this when he painted it, because there would be a time where even if he wanted to, he couldn't. There'd be a time where he would be paralyzed, incapacitated, where even though he wanted to paint, he couldn't. Even though he wanted to write letters, he couldn't. And so if he'd taken a little bit longer to write Starry Night, I don't know if he could have pulled it off. He still had enough clear-eyed precision, clear-eyed thinking that he was able to do it. And you're going to see, and we'll go into this through episodes 85, 6, 7, 8, 9, the rest of his journey through the asylum period. It's grim. This was a triumph. This was, and he didn't really realize it. I mean, he realized it now, but I think he had second thoughts about it later, as many of us do. But his life was about to get a whole lot harder and a whole lot more difficult. And the amazing thing is, and one's got to remember this as we go on this journey with him, is that he would ultimately transcend that as well. That he would go into a really, 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 really dark place in the asylum and emerge the other side and breathe the free air again. It really is an incredible story. I don't know when I'm going to continue this journey on Van Gogh. I really just wanted to get to the Starry Night, but do consider the membership categories and whatnot. I do think you'll agree that the last 3 episodes have been pretty incredible, and you needed to group them together. So even though I've had quite a lot of work to do on the other channel, especially right now, I just really wanted to attend to this before we got out of June. Like, I kind of wanted to do this in sync with the timeline. But I mean, we managed to get to the 18th of June, a week behind schedule, which is not too shabby. Anyway, I'm sure you'll agree with me. This is really worthwhile, really poignant, and it's the sort of thing that we need in our lives. Meaningful narratives about real people that deal with things like resilience, transcendence, being able to validate yourself, not being validated by numbers or popularity, but by authenticity, for the lack of a better word. Jalsi says, where is it? I can't find it. Okay, well, not sure what to say about that. What does Robbie say? My daughter just finished her English literature degree. So many challenges, but she has done it. Well done. Well done. Okay, so that is it from me. If you guys want some additional inspiration, if this wasn't enough, go to my ex Twitter and look for the little thing I posted about. It's a woman who's training with Lucy Charles Barkley. It's pretty inspiring stuff. I would really love to be in England in July when she takes part in a big race, but I don't think I'm going to have enough time to get my visa ready. We've got to have a visa for England. It's one of the consequences of living in a shithole country, that we've got to get visas to go anywhere. Anyway, great comment. If you truly love nature, you'll find beauty everywhere. Okay, that's it from me, guys. Take care. Thanks a lot for Chelsea for being here for the full 3.5 hours. Pretty incredible. And I'll see you guys next time. Ciao. Stay inspired.